The desert heat shimmered like liquid glass across the Iraqi sand. 1,800 meters away, through a scope that turned distance into intimacy, Lieutenant Jack Sullivan watched 12 men die in slow motion. Not by his hand, not yet, but they would be dead in 40 seconds if he didn't pull the trigger. The math was simple. The choice was not. His spotter's voice crackled through the headset, young and tight with fear. Target acquired, range confirmed. Wind 3 knots east. The kid was 22, fresh from stateside, still believed the movies. Still thought war had soundtracks and meaning. Sullivan knew better. He had known better since his first kill in Panama, back when the world was different and he was younger, and the weight of a rifle felt like power instead of responsibility. He exhaled half a breath, held it. The crosshairs settled on a man's chest, some Iraqi soldier who probably had a wife, maybe children, definitely a mother who prayed for him. The trigger broke clean. The rifle pushed into his shoulder with familiar violence. Through the scope, 1,800 meters collapsed into nothing. The round took 2.3 seconds to arrive. The man jerked once, went down, and the others scattered like startled birds. Sullivan worked the bolt, chambered another round, found the second target, squeezed. The pattern repeated. Mechanical, efficient. 40 seconds became reality. 12 men became memories. And down in the valley, a Marine platoon that included Corporal Marcus Hendricks broke through the ambush and lived to see another day. They called him the Ghost of Baghdad. After that, the name stuck. Sullivan never liked it much. 34 years later, the Ghost sat in a sterile office at Walter Reed Medical Center and listened to a doctor half his age explain how he was dying. The words came wrapped in medical terminology, softened by professional sympathy, but the message was crystal clear. Stage 3 lung cancer, 6 to 9 months, maybe a year if he was lucky. Treatment options existed. Chemotherapy, radiation, clinical trials. None of them changed the math. The war he couldn't shoot his way out of had finally found him. Sullivan stared out of the window at the gray Washington sky and thought about numbers. 36 years in uniform, 3 wars, 5 deployments, 168 confirmed kills, 3 Silver Stars, 1 Navy Cross, 2 failed marriages, 1 son. Dead at 22 in a valley in Afghanistan, his body draped in the same flag that would soon cover his father's coffin. The doctor was still talking. Quality of life, palliative care, getting affairs in order. Sullivan heard maybe 1 word in 3. His mind was elsewhere, running calculations like he used to run wind calls. 6 months, 180 days, 4,320 hours. How much of that time would be useful? How much would be spent withering in a bed, drowning in his own fluids, becoming a burden to people he barely knew anymore? He interrupted the doctor mid-sentence. If I refuse treatment, how long do I stay functional? The doctor blinked, recalibrated. 4 months, maybe 5. You'll feel relatively normal until you don't. Then it happens fast. 4 months. Sullivan could work with 4 months. He walked out of Walter Reed without scheduling a follow-up appointment. The receptionist called after him, but he didn't stop. Outside, the November air hit cold and clean. He stood on the sidewalk and watched people hurry past, wrapped in their small urgencies, their minor disasters, their complete and total ignorance of how fragile everything was. None of them understood. You could be walking and breathing and planning tomorrow, and then a doctor says 6 months and tomorrow becomes a luxury you can no longer afford. Sullivan pulled out his phone, scrolled to a number he hadn't called in 3 years. The line rang twice. Marcus Hendricks picked up on the 3rd ring. His voice carried the weight of command now, Colonel Stars instead of Corporal Stripes, but underneath it was still the kid from that ambush in Iraq, Jack. Been a while. Sullivan watched his breath steam in the cold air. I need 1 more mission, Marcus. There was a pause, long enough for Hendricks to understand this wasn't a social call. What kind of mission? The kind I don't come back from. The silence stretched longer this time. When Hendricks spoke again, his voice had changed. How long? 6 months, maybe less. Where are you? Walter Reed, just got the news. Stay there, I'm 20 minutes out. Hendricks made it in 15. They sat in his staff car in the parking garage, 2 old soldiers who had bled together in the sand, and Sullivan laid out what he wanted. Not a suicide mission, nothing dramatic. Just 1 last chance to do what he did best. Pass it on. Leave something behind that mattered more than a folded flag and a headstone at Arlington. He wanted to teach. Hendricks listened without interrupting. When Sullivan finished, the colonel was quiet for a long moment, staring through the windshield at nothing in particular. Finally, he spoke. "We've got a sniper course starting in 2 weeks at Bragg. Standard rotation, 40 candidates. Most will wash out. The ones who make it will be good, but not great. We need great, Jack. We always need great." "That's what I'm offering." Hendricks turned to look at him. "The doctors know you're doing this?" "The doctors think I'm going to spend my last months getting pumped full of poison that might buy me an extra 60 days of being too sick to stand. This is my choice, Marcus. I'm asking you to respect it." The colonel nodded slowly. "How do you want to play it?" Sullivan had thought about this during the drive. "Give me full access to the candidate files. I'll pick one. Not the best shooter, not the highest scores. Someone with potential they don't know they have yet. I'll train them like I trained my son. Like I should have trained him better." Hendricks looked away at that. They both knew what happened to Matt Sullivan. Everyone in the community knew. Second Lieutenant Matthew Sullivan, 1st Ranger Battalion, killed in action at 22 when he threw himself on a fragmentation grenade to save his squad. Posthumous Medal of Honor. His father wasn't there. His father was 6,000 miles away, teaching other people's sons how to kill at distance. And by the time Jack made it home, Matt was already in the ground. "You can't change what happened to Matt," Hendricks said quietly. Sullivan's jaw tightened. "I know that, but I can honor it. I can make sure someone else's kid learns what Matt never got the chance to learn from me." Hendricks started the car. The engine rumbled to life. "Let me make some calls. You'll have your class. But Jack, when the time comes when you can't do it anymore, you tell me. I'm not watching you fall apart in front of those kids." "I'll tell you," Sullivan lied. They both knew it was a lie, but Hendricks let it stand because friendship meant respecting a man's right to die on his own terms. 2 weeks later, Sullivan stood in a small office at Fort Bragg and reviewed 40 personnel files. The folders spread across the desk like cards in a game of solitaire. Each one represented a soldier who wanted to be a sniper. Most wanted it for the wrong reasons. The prestige, the mystique, the idea of being a ghost. They saw the movie version, not the reality. Not the weight that came with every trigger pull, not the faces that visited you in the dark at 3 in the morning, 30 years after you put them in the ground. He read every file twice, looking for something most recruiters wouldn't recognize. Not the highest aptitude scores, not the best physical fitness numbers. He was looking for hunger, real hunger, the kind that came from loss, the kind that understood sacrifice wasn't a word, it was a debt you paid in pieces of yourself. He found it in folder number 27. Corporal Rachel Carter, 27 years old, 4 years in service, 2 deployments, logistics specialist, rifle qualification expert, psych eval, stable but reserved, performance reviews, competent, reliable, rarely volunteers for high-profile assignments, family history, Father K, IA 2010, Afghanistan, mother deceased 2003, no siblings, no close relatives listed. Sullivan stared at the service photo. She looked back at the camera with eyes that didn't smile even though her mouth did. He recognized those eyes. He saw them in the mirror every morning. Eyes that had lost something and spent every day after trying to prove the loss meant something. He checked her range scores, consistently high. Not the highest in her unit, but top 10%. More importantly, her groupings were tight, controlled. The mark of someone who understood patience, who didn't rush, who took the time to do it right even when no one was watching. Sullivan flipped to the last page, found what he was looking for in the notes section, a single line from her platoon sergeant, written 3 months ago during a qualification exercise. Carter requested additional range time on her own initiative, fired 200 rounds using personal leave time. When asked why, stated she wanted to understand the fundamentals better. Recommend for advanced training if opportunity arises. That was it. That was the tell. She wasn't trying to be the best. She was trying to understand. That difference mattered more than talent. Talent could be wasted. Understanding could be built on. Sullivan closed the file, stood, walked to the window and looked out at the ranges in the distance. He thought about Matt, 22 years old, bright and eager and convinced he was invincible right up until the moment he proved he wasn't. Jack had taught his son to shoot when Matt was 13, back at the family ranch in Texas. Summer afternoons, father and son, tin cans at 50 yards, Matt was a natural, hit 9 out of 10 on his first try. Sullivan remembered feeling proud, feeling like he'd passed something important down. But he hadn't taught Matt the important parts. He hadn't taught him that courage without wisdom was just another word for dying young. He hadn't taught him that saving your brothers was noble, but sometimes the best way to save them was to stay alive yourself and keep fighting. He hadn't taught him those things because he was never there. Always deployed, always training someone else's kids, always assuming there would be time later. There wasn't. Rachel Carter would be different. She would get everything Sullivan had learned in 36 years. Every hard lesson, every mistake, every piece of knowledge bought with blood and measured in the distance between heartbeats. She would get the father he should have been to Matt. And if he was lucky, if he did this right, she would live long enough to pass it on to someone else. The legacy wouldn't die with him. It would continue. That had to mean something. It had to. He made his choice. The next morning, Sullivan stood outside the barracks at 0500 hours and waited. The November darkness was absolute. No moon. Stars hidden behind cloud cover. His breath formed ghosts in the cold air. He heard boots on pavement before he saw her. She appeared out of the darkness like a question mark, dressed in PTs, hair pulled back in a regulation bun. "Corporal Carter," she stopped, straightened. Her eyes were alert despite the hour. "Yes, Sergeant." "Master Sergeant," he corrected. "Walk with me." They walked the perimeter road in silence for a full minute. Sullivan let the quiet stretch out, watching how she handled it. Some soldiers needed to fill silence with nervous chatter. Carter didn't. She matched his pace, kept her eyes forward, waited. Patient, good. "You know who I am?" Sullivan finally asked. She hesitated. "Only by reputation, Master Sergeant." "Which is?" "They say you're the Ghost of Baghdad. 168 confirmed kills. 3 Silver Stars, Navy Cross. Instructor at the Advanced Sniper School for 15 years. Currently on terminal leave, but recalled for one final training rotation." Sullivan almost smiled. Terminal leave. The term was more accurate than she knew. "Who told you all that?" "Sergeant First Class Garrett mentioned it when the course roster posted. Said if I was smart, I'd volunteer for whatever assignment you offered." "And did you?" "No, Master Sergeant." Now Sullivan did smile. It was barely visible in the darkness. "Why not?" She chose her words carefully. "Because volunteering suggests I think I'm ready for something I haven't earned yet. I'm a logistics specialist. I can shoot, but I'm not a sniper. I don't have the training. I don't have the experience. Volunteering would be presumptuous." Sullivan stopped walking, turned to face her. In the dim glow from a distant streetlight, he could see her face. Young, serious, careful. She was protecting herself, building walls. He understood that too. "Do you want to be a sniper, Carter?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Yes, Master Sergeant." "Why?" That answer took longer. When it came, it was quieter. "My father was Navy. Chief Petty Officer Thomas Carter. He died in Helmand Province when I was 17. They told me he was killed during a Taliban ambush. His team was pinned down. Air support was delayed. They held position for 40 minutes before reinforcements arrived. My father and 3 others didn't make it." Sullivan listened. Let her continue. "For years after, I wondered if there was someone out there who could have made a difference. Someone with a rifle and the skill to use it. Someone who could have stopped that ambush before it started. Change the math. Save those men." Her voice remained steady, but something moved behind her eyes. "I don't want to be the person who wonders. I want to be the person who changes the math." Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "Starting tomorrow, you're assigned to me. Not to the general sniper course. To me personally. You'll train separately. Harder, longer. I'm going to teach you everything I know. And when I'm done, you're going to be the person who changes the math. Understood?" Carter's eyes widened slightly. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Master Sergeant, I don't understand. There are 40 candidates, some with much better credentials than mine. Why me?" "Because when I look at you, I see my son, and I owe him a debt I can never repay. But maybe I can repay it forward." He turned and started walking again. She hurried to catch up. "Master Sergeant, I need to know. Am I ready for this?" Sullivan kept his eyes forward. "No, but you will be. 0600 hours tomorrow. Range 12. Bring your kit in the M24 you'll be issued tonight. Don't be late." He left her, standing there in the darkness. Didn't look back. Didn't want her to see what was on his face. Didn't want her to know that his hands were shaking. Not from fear, from something else. Something that felt almost like hope. That night, Sullivan sat alone in his temporary quarters and opened a worn photo album. The pictures were old. Film, not digital. The colors had faded, but the memories hadn't. There was Matt at 8 years old, holding his first rifle, grinning so wide his face seemed too small to contain it. Matt at 13, serious now, concentrating on a target downrange. Matt at 18, in dress blues at his commissioning ceremony, standing tall and proud and so young it hurt to look at. The last photo was different, official, formal. Matt in his dress uniform for the Medal of Honor citation. Except Matt wasn't there to wear it. Jack wore it for him, stood in the East Wing of the White House, and accepted a piece of blue ribbon and a bronze star for the price of his son's life. The president had said words about valor and sacrifice. Jack had nodded and shook hands and smiled at the appropriate times, and inside he was screaming. He closed the album, put it away. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow he would do what he should have done years ago, teach someone not just how to shoot, but why it mattered, how to carry the weight, how to live with the ghosts. Tomorrow he would build the sniper his son never got the chance to become. The next morning arrived cold and clear. Sullivan was at the range by 0530, setting up targets at various distances. 600 meters, 800, 1,000, 1,200. He worked methodically, checking angles, confirming sight lines, making sure everything was perfect. His body protested. The cancer was still quiet, lurking, but he could feel it in his chest when he breathed too deep. He ignored it. Pain was information, nothing more. Rachel Carter arrived at 0555. Early. Good. She carried the M24 rifle case with both hands, treating it with respect. Also good. Too many young soldiers treated weapons like tools. They were more than that. They were a responsibility given physical form. Sullivan watched her approach. She tied her hair back tight, no makeup, no jewelry, serious face. She looked nervous but determined. He approved. Nervousness meant she understood the stakes. Determination meant she wouldn't quit. Set up on the line, he said, prone position. We're starting at 600 meters. She opened the case. The M24 lay nested in foam, clean and oiled. She lifted it out with practiced care. Checked the chamber. Checked the safety. Set up her shooting position with reasonable form. Not perfect, but teachable. Sullivan knelt beside her, said nothing, just watched. She settled in behind the scope, found the target, a standard silhouette black against the pale morning sky. Her breathing was too fast, her grip too tight. Stop, Sullivan said. She froze. You're fighting the rifle. He reached over, adjusted her grip. The weapon is not your enemy. It's your partner. You work together. She does the killing. You do the thinking. Understand? Yes, Master Sergeant. Now breathe. In for 4 counts. Hold for 2. Out for 4. Let your heart rate slow. Find the rhythm between beats. That's where the shot lives. She followed his instructions. He watched her shoulders drop. Tension bleeding out. Better. What do you see through that scope? A target, Master Sergeant. Wrong. Sullivan's voice was patient but firm. You see a human being. Maybe an enemy. Maybe someone who will kill your brothers if who don't stop them. But still human. Still someone's son or father or brother. The day you stop seeing that, the day targets become just paper or just meat, that's the day you become something less than a soldier. You become a killer. And there's a difference. Rachel was quiet. He could see her processing. Good. Let her think. Shooting at distance isn't just about skill. It's about responsibility. Every round you send downrange represents a choice, a decision about life and death. You need to understand that weight before you ever take a life, because after you do, you carry it forever. All of them, every single one. He stood. Step back. Make the shot when you're ready. Don't rush. We have all day. Rachel settled back into position. This time her breathing was controlled. Her grip relaxed. She took her time. Sullivan watched the wind flags, 2 knots. Variable. She'd have to compensate. The shot cracked across the range. 600 meters away, the target remained untouched. The round hit low and left. She worked the bolt. Chambered another. Fired again. Still low, closer, but not there. Sullivan said nothing. Let her work through it. She fired 8 more rounds, 7 misses, 1 hit on the edge of the silhouette. She lowered the rifle. Her jaw was tight, frustrated. You know what you're doing wrong, Sullivan asked. She thought about it. Wind compensation? No, you're calculating numbers and formulas. That's fine for a computer. But you're not a computer, you're a predator. Stop thinking, start feeling. How do I feel wind? The same way you feel everything else that matters. You pay attention. Sullivan walked to the firing line, held up his hand. Feel that? The air moving across your skin? That's not wind speed, that's direction. That's temperature, that's moisture content. All of it affects the round. You can memorize tables and charts, but in the field, under stress, you won't have time for math. You need instinct, built through repetition, through failure, through learning to trust what your body knows even when your mind doubts. He moved behind her again. Close the scope, fire without it. Master Sergeant, you heard me. Use iron sights, 600 meters. I want you to understand distance before you try to cheat it with optics. Rachel hesitated, then complied. She flipped up the backup sights. Crude, simple, honest. The target was barely visible at this range, a dark smudge against lighter background. Now take the shot. She aimed, fired, missed by a mile. Again, she fired 10 more rounds, not a single hit. Her frustration was evident now, visible in the set of her shoulders, the tightness of her mouth. Sullivan let her burn through half a magazine, then stopped her. Enough. What did you learn? That iron sights are useless at 600 meters? No, you learned that distance is real, that putting a round on target at range isn't magic. It's earned. Every meter between you and your target is a problem you have to solve. Wind, drop, rotation of the earth, temperature, humidity, your own heartbeat. All of it matters. All of it has to be accounted for. The scope makes it easier, but the fundamentals are the same whether you can see your target clearly or not. He knelt beside her again. Put the scope back on. Try again. But this time, remember what you just learned. Don't trust the glass. Trust the fundamentals. She adjusted her position, looked through the scope. He could see her thinking, processing, integrating the lesson. She took a breath, held it. The rifle cracked. 600 meters away, the target shuddered. Center mass. Sullivan nodded. Better. Again. She fired 9 more rounds, 7 hits, all center mass. Her grouping tightened with each shot. By the end, she was consistent, repeatable, building muscle memory. Good. Sullivan checked his watch. 7:30. We're here until 1800. That's 10 and a half hours. I want 500 rounds through that rifle by end of day. Distances from 400 to 1200 meters. Variable conditions. You'll learn to compensate for everything. Questions? Master Sergeant, that's a lot of ammunition. Yes, it is. And every round costs the taxpayers about $4. So don't waste them. Make each one count. Each one is a lesson. Each lesson is paid for. Honor that. She nodded, settled back into position. Sullivan walked to a folding chair he'd set up 30 feet back. Sat down, watched. This was the work now. Not shooting, teaching, being present, giving her what he never gave Matt. Time, attention, the patient transfer of knowledge that couldn't be rushed or shortcut or assumed. The morning passed in measured rhythm. Crack of the rifle, clang of bolt, brass hitting dirt. Each shot followed by silence, by adjustment, by the next attempt. Sullivan didn't talk much, didn't need to. He'd make small corrections, shift her elbow 2 inches, adjust her cheek weld, remind her to breathe. But mostly he just watched. Let her fail. Let her learn. Around 1100 hours, she missed 5 shots in a row at 900 meters. Frustration crept back in. He could see it in how she jerked the trigger instead of squeezed it. Take a break, he said. She lowered the rifle, looked back at him. I can keep going, Master Sergeant. I know you can. That's not the question. The question is, should you? Come here. She stood, walked over. He gestured to the ground. She sat. Sullivan looked out at the targets. Patience isn't just waiting. It's knowing when to push and when to pause. Your body is telling you something right now. Listen to it. I'm fine. He glanced at her. You're rushing, trying to make up for the misses with volume. That's ego talking. Ego will get you killed in the field. Take 10 minutes. Drink water. eat something, let your muscles reset. Then we continue. She wanted to argue. He could see it, but she was smart enough not to. She pulled a protein bar from her pack, ate in silence. Sullivan watched the clouds move overhead, felt the wind shift. His chest ached, but he didn't let it show. Not yet. He had time. Enough time. He had to believe that. Your father, he said. The ambush in Helmand. You said air support was delayed. Do you know why? Rachel looked up, surprised by the question. Sandstorm. The pilots couldn't get visual confirmation. Sullivan nodded. Weather. One of the variables you can't control, can't plan for, can only adapt to. That's the real skill in this work. Not the shooting. Any fool with a steady hand can learn to hit a target. But adapting, surviving, making the right choice under pressure, when everything is wrong, that's what separates snipers from shooters. He turned to look at her. Your father held position for 40 minutes under fire because that was his mission. He did his job knowing air support might not arrive in time. That's courage, but it's also a lesson. Sometimes the mission isn't worth the cost. Sometimes living to fight another day matters more than glory. Your father didn't have that choice, but you will when the time comes, when you're in position and the mission is falling apart and every instinct says to stay and fight. I want you to remember that it's okay to live. It's okay to retreat. Survival isn't cowardice, it's wisdom. Rachel's eyes were wet. She looked away, wiped them quickly. Thank you, Master Sergeant. He stood, offered his hand, pulled her up. Now get back on that rifle. We've got 400 rounds to go. The afternoon was harder. The sun moved. The wind shifted. The shots that worked in the morning failed in different light. Rachel struggled, adapted, struggled again, but she didn't quit, didn't complain, just kept shooting, kept learning. By 1800 hours, she'd fired 537 rounds. Her shoulder was bruised. Her fingers ached from working the bolt. But her groupings at 1200 meters were tight enough that Sullivan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Pack it up, he said. Tomorrow's 600, same place. She cleaned the rifle in silence. Careful, methodical, treating the weapon with the respect it deserved. Master Sergeant, he looked up. Why am I training separately from the other candidates? Because they're learning to be snipers. You're learning to be something else. What's that? My legacy. He walked away before she could respond, left her standing there with the rifle and the weight of what he'd just said. That night, Sullivan sat in his quarters and coughed until he tasted copper. The cancer was waking up, making its presence known. He had time, but not as much as he'd hoped. 4 months was optimistic. 3 was more realistic. He'd have to work faster, push harder, give Rachel everything before the body failed. He pulled out a notebook, started writing. Everything he knew, everything he'd learned, every trick and technique and hard-won lesson from 36 years behind a rifle. The words came slowly at first, then faster, cramped handwriting filling page after page. Wind calls, range estimation, camouflage techniques, psychological preparation, how to slow your heartbeat, how to predict target movement, how to live with the ghosts after. He wrote for 3 hours, didn't stop until his hand cramped and the letters blurred. Then he put the notebook in an envelope, sealed it, wrote Rachel's name on the front. This was the backup plan. If he died before he could teach her everything, she'd at least have the manual. The knowledge wouldn't die with him. But he wasn't dead yet. And while he breathed, while he could still stand and speak and demonstrate, he'd do this the right way. Face to face, teacher and student, the way it was meant to be. He looked at the photo album again. Matt's face smiled back at him through decades. I've found her, son. She's good. She'll be better. I promise you that. I'll do this right. The photo didn't answer, but Sullivan felt something shift in his chest. Not the cancer, something else. Something that felt like purpose. Like the weight he'd been carrying might finally mean something. He closed the album, turned off the light. Tomorrow would come early, and he had a warrior to build. 30 days. That was all Sullivan asked for. 30 days to compress a lifetime of knowledge into one student. 30 days to build what should take years. 30 days before his body started the final betrayal, and he became useless to everyone, including himself. The math was brutal but simple. 720 hours. Minus sleep, minus the time his body demanded for rest he couldn't afford, Left maybe 500 hours of useful instruction. 500 hours to create a legacy worth remembering. He started before dawn on day 2. Rachel arrived at the range at 0545, 15 minutes early. Sullivan was already there. Had been since 0400, setting up a training evolution that would break most soldiers by lunch. Targets at every distance from 300 to 1500 meters. Some static, some on mechanical movers that simulated walking, some partially concealed behind barriers. The real world didn't offer clean shots. The real world offered problems. She walked up carrying the M24 like it meant something. Good. Yesterday had taught her respect. Today would teach her everything else. New drill, Sullivan said without preamble. You've got 12 targets, distances marked on the cards. You'll engage them in sequence, 1 shot each. No do-overs, no second chances. Time limit is 8 minutes. That's 40 seconds per target. Miss more than 2 and we start over. Questions? Rachel set down her kit, studied the range. He could see her brain working, calculating, trying to find the pattern. There wasn't one. That was the point. The Master Sergeant, some of these targets are over 1,000 meters. I've never shot past 1,200. I know. That's why we're here. Combat doesn't wait for you to be ready. It happens when it happens. You adapt or you die. Start when I say go. He pulled out a stopwatch, clicked it once. The sound was sharp in the morning quiet. Go. Rachel dropped into position, smooth, faster than yesterday. Her first shot cracked out at 18 seconds. 300 meters, center mass. She worked the bolt, adjusted, found the second target, 500 meters. The round took it high shoulder, still a kill. Third target, 700. She compensated for windage. Fired. Miss, low and right. Sullivan said nothing. Watched. She was rushing, trying to beat the clock instead of trusting her training. Classic mistake. The 4th shot was good, the 5th better. By the 6th, she'd found her rhythm. Stopped fighting the timer, let muscle memory take over. 8 minutes and 13 seconds later, she'd engaged all 12 targets. 7 hits, 5 misses. She looked back at him, waiting for judgment. Sullivan consulted his notes. What did you do wrong? Rushed the long shots. Didn't account for wind change between targets 8 and 9. What else? She thought about it. Didn't properly confirm my zeros after the first miss. Assumed the rifle was still dialed in. Anything else? I held my breath too long on target 11. Lost fine motor control. Sullivan nodded. All correct. Now do it again. 7 minutes this time. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't argue. Just reloaded and reset. This run she got 9 hits. Third run, 10. By the 5th iteration, she was perfect. 12 for 12, 6 minutes 40 seconds. Her shoulder would be purple by evening, but she never complained. Sullivan called a halt at 1000 hours. They'd burned through 300 rounds. Rachel's hands shook from fatigue as she cleaned the rifle. He let her work in silence for a few minutes, then spoke. You shoot better under pressure than without it. You know why? She looked up. No, Master Sergeant, because you stop thinking. Your brain gets out of the way and lets your body do what it's been trained to do. That's the goal. That's what separates good shooters from great ones. The ability to turn off the conscious mind and trust the 10,000 hours of repetition that came before. He pulled a thermos from his pack, poured coffee into 2 metal cups, handed her one. She took it gratefully. My son had that quality, Sullivan said. The words came without planning, without intention. But once started, he couldn't stop them. Matt could shoot from the time he was 13. Natural talent, but more than that, he had ice in his veins, could take fire and return it without his heart rate changing. The Army recognized it, put him in Rangers, fast-tracked him to officer. By 21, he was leading men in combat. By 22, he was dead. Rachel was very still, listening. Sullivan stared into his coffee, saw his reflection fractured in the dark liquid. The last mission, his squad was clearing compounds in Kandahar province, house to house. Slow work. Dangerous. They'd been at it for 6 hours when someone kicked in the wrong door. Taliban fighter with a grenade, pin already pulled. Matt saw it hit the floor, had maybe 2 seconds to decide. He could have run, could have dove for cover. His training said to get clear and minimize casualties. But he looked at his men, kids really, 19, 20 years old, someone's sons, and he made a different choice. The coffee had gone cold in Sullivan's hands, but he didn't notice. They gave him the Medal of Honor. Posthumous. Valor above and beyond. The president shook my hand and said Matt died a hero. And he did. He absolutely did. But Rachel, here's what nobody tells you about heroism. It doesn't care about your dreams or your future or the people who love you. Heroism just takes, and when it's done taking, you're dead, and everyone else gets to talk about how proud they are. He finally looked up, met her eyes. I'm teaching you to be a sniper. But more than that, I'm teaching you to survive, to make the hard choices that keep you breathing. Because dead heroes don't train the next generation. Dead heroes just leave holes in families and flags on coffins. You understand? Yes, Master Sergeant. Good. Finish that coffee, we've got more work. The afternoon session was different. Sullivan led her away from the known distance range into the woods. No markers, no measured targets, just trees and shadows in the occasional clearing. This was fieldcraft, the art of becoming invisible, of reading terrain, of understanding that the best shot was often the one you didn't have to take because the enemy never knew you were there. He moved through the forest like smoke, 60 years old and dying, and he still remembered how. Rachel followed, tried to match his steps, failed, snapped twigs, rustled leaves, left a trail a blind man could follow. Sullivan stopped, turned, stopped moving like a soldier. Soldiers march, stomping and loud and announcing their presence because they're counting on numbers and firepower to win the day. You're not a soldier anymore. You're a predator. Predators don't announce. They glide. Show me. He demonstrated, weighed on the balls of his feet, each step tested before committed, eyes constantly scanning for the next position. Movement so slow it barely registered. He covered 20 meters in 3 minutes, made no sound, left no trace. Your turn. Rachel tried, stopped every few feet to check her footing, moved in fits and starts, awkward, self-conscious. You're thinking too much again. Stop treating this like a test. Treat it like hunting. You ever hunt? My father took me deer hunting once, before he deployed. I was 12. Did you catch anything? We sat in a blind for 6 hours. Saw one buck. I got excited, made noise. It ran. My father said patience and silence are the same thing. You can't have one without the other. Sullivan smiled. Your father was a wise man. That's the lesson. Patience, silence, becoming part of the environment instead of fighting it. Try again. But this time pretend you're 12 years old waiting for that buck. Don't chase it, let it come to you. She took a breath, settled something inside herself, moved again. This time it was better, slower, more deliberate. She made it 30 meters before stepping on a branch that cracked like a gunshot. Better, again. They spent 4 hours in the woods. By the end, Rachel could move 50 meters with only minor noise. Not perfect, but approaching functional. Sullivan marked mental notes. She learned fast, adapted, took criticism without defensiveness. Matt had been the same way. Quick study, eager, willing to fail in order to improve. The thought brought pain sharp enough to make him cough. He turned away, covered his mouth, tasted copper. The cancer had been quiet for weeks. Now it was waking up, stretching, reminding him that borrowed time always came due. Master Sergeant? Rachel's voice carried concern. I'm fine. Sullivan straightened, wiped his mouth. Allergies, let's head back. She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes, but she didn't push. They walked back to the range in silence. That evening, Sullivan sat in his quarters and wrote in the notebook. Today's lessons added to the growing manual. But words on paper weren't enough. He needed to show her, needed to demonstrate the things that couldn't be explained. The intuition that came from 10,000 repetitions. The muscle memory that saved your life when the brain froze. A knock at the door interrupted his writing. It's open. Captain Lisa Chen stepped inside. She was 33, intelligence officer, sharp enough to see through every lie Sullivan had told about his health. She closed the door behind her, leaned against it. You're getting worse. It wasn't a question. Sullivan set down his pen. Didn't bother denying it. I've got time. How much? Enough. Chen crossed her arms. Jack, I know what you're doing, and I understand why. But that girl out there, she deserves to know what she's part of. She deserves the truth. The truth is, I'm teaching her to be the best sniper in this man's army. Everything else is irrelevant. Is it? Because when you collapse in front of her, when she has to watch you die, that's going to matter. That's going to leave a scar. Sullivan stood, walked to the window, looked out at the darkening base. Then she'll understand the cost. She'll understand that everything worth doing comes with sacrifice. And maybe that lesson will keep her alive when the time comes to make her own hard choices. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she sighed. Hendricks knows. He's giving you rope because you're Jack Sullivan and you've earned the right to die on your own terms. But the moment you become a liability to that training mission, the moment you put Carter or anyone else at risk, he'll pull you. And I'll support him. Fair enough. She moved to leave, stopped at the door. For what it's worth, what you're doing for her, it matters. Just don't let your ghost story become her nightmare. She left. Sullivan stood at the window for another hour, watching the base settle into evening routine, thinking about ghosts and nightmares and the thin line between sacrifice and selfishness. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a rhythm of repetition and refinement. Dawn runs through obstacle courses while wearing full kit. Morning sessions on the range, distances stretching longer each day. Afternoons in the field, learning to read wind by watching grass, to estimate range by understanding how light changed with distance, to predict human movement by understanding psychology. Evenings spent cleaning weapons and reviewing the day's lessons. Rachel transformed. The nervous logistics specialist disappeared. Something harder emerged. She stopped asking permission, stopped second-guessing. Her shots became instinctive, her movements economical. The rifle stopped being a tool and became an extension of her will. Sullivan watched the metamorphosis with satisfaction and sadness. This was what Matt could have become, should have become, if there had been time, if Sullivan had been there, if 1,000 things had been different. On day 16, Staff Sergeant Ben Garrett appeared at the range. He was 35, current top-ranked sniper in the unit, Sullivan's first student from 15 years ago. He'd heard about the private training, came to see what the old man was building. He watched Rachel engage targets at 1,400 meters, watched her adjust for a wind shift without being told, watched her put 5 rounds in a 10-inch circle at distance that made most shooters weep. Garrett whistled low. She's good. She's getting there, Sullivan said. Better than good. Better than anyone in the current class. Garrett paused. Why her, Sarge? Why not someone from the program, someone with the background? Because she doesn't know enough to be limited by doctrine. She's learning pure. No bad habits to unlearn. No ego telling her she's already good enough. Garrett nodded slowly. You're doing something different with her. This isn't standard curriculum. Standard curriculum creates standard snipers. I don't need standard. I need exceptional. For what? Garrett's eyes were sharp. You training her for something specific? Sullivan was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm training her to outlive me, to carry forward what I'm leaving behind. That's specific enough? Garrett understood then. His expression changed. How long? Not long enough. They stood in silence, watching Rachel work. Finally, Garrett spoke again. You want me to help? I've got time. Could run her through urban scenarios, multiple target engagements, the stuff you can't do out here on flat range. Sullivan considered it, nodded. Starting tomorrow, 1,400 hours. But Garrett, don't go easy. Don't treat her like she's fragile. She needs pressure, real pressure. The pressure she'd get in combat? Exactly that. Garrett left. Sullivan turned back to Rachel. She'd finished her session, was breaking down the rifle for cleaning. He walked over. Tomorrow afternoon, you are working with Staff Sergeant Garrett. He's going to run urban scenarios with you. It won't be like this. It'll be hard, confusing, chaotic. You'll fail, probably multiple times. That's the point. Rachel looked up, no longer asking why, just accepting. Yes, Master Sergeant. Good. Pack it up. 0600 tomorrow we're doing something different. What's that? Sullivan allowed himself a small smile. You'll see. The next morning he took her to a different part of the base, an old training facility that hadn't been used in years. Inside was a mock-up of a 2-story building, windows broken, walls pocked with bullet holes from 100 training exercises. It smelled of dust and old concrete. Sullivan handed her a pair of shooting glasses and ear protection. Today you learn what it means to take a line, real understanding, not just pulling a trigger on a target, understanding the moment before, the moment after, the weight that comes with it. He led her upstairs, set up the rifle on a table facing a window that overlooked a courtyard, positioned a realistic mannequin 300 meters away. Not a paper target, not a silhouette, a figure that looked human, dressed in civilian clothes, face detailed enough to have features. Rachel stared at it. Something changed in her expression. That's the reality, Sullivan said quietly. The scope makes it intimate. You'll see details. Maybe a wedding ring, maybe a photograph in their pocket, maybe the expression on their face in that final second. All of it becomes part of the memory, part of the weight you carry forever. He positioned her behind the rifle. Let her look through the scope. I've taken 168 lives, Sullivan continued. I remember all of them. Not names, but faces, moments. The Iraqi soldier in Fallujah who was eating an apple when my round hit. The Taliban fighter in Afghanistan who was praying. The insurgent in Syria who reminded me of my cousin. Every single one is a photograph burned into memory. They visit me at night, some nights more than others. That's the price. You need to understand that price before you decide if you can pay it. Rachel's hands were steady on the rifle, but her breathing had changed. Shallow, quick. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to prepare you, because the first time you take a life, you'll feel one of two things. Either nothing, which means you're broken in ways that can't be fixed, or everything, which means you're human. Most people feel everything. Regret, doubt, guilt, even when the kill was righteous. Even when it saved lives, you'll feel it. He placed his hand on her shoulder. And here's what I need you to know. Feeling it doesn't make you weak. It makes you suitable for this work. Because soldiers who feel nothing become monsters. And we already have enough monsters in the world. Rachel lowered her face from the scope, looked at him. Master Sergeant, how do you live with it? 168, how do you carry that? By remembering the ones I saved. Every kill I made, I did the math. Calculated the lives preserved by removing that threat. It doesn't make the weight lighter, but it makes it bearable. Because I didn't kill for sport or anger or pride. I killed to protect, to defend, to change the math like your father tried to do. That distinction matters. He stepped back. Take the shot, not because you have to, because you choose to, because you understand what it means and accept the responsibility. If you can't, if the weight is too heavy before you even begin, I need to know now. Rachel settled back behind the rifle, took her time. Sullivan watched her face, saw the internal struggle, the moment of decision. She exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger. The mannequin's head snapped back from the impact. She lowered the rifle. Her hands were shaking now. Sullivan handed her a bottle of water. She drank without tasting it. How do you feel? Her voice was barely a whisper. Like I just did something I can't take back. Good. That's exactly right. You can't take it back. None of us can. Every trigger pull is a decision that echoes forward forever. The day you forget that is the day you need to turn in your rifle and walk away. They sat in silence for several minutes. Sullivan let her process. Let the reality sink in. This was the moment that separated those who could do the work from those who only thought they could. Finally, Rachel spoke. I can carry it, Master Sergeant. The weight, I understand it now. And I can carry it. I know you can. That's why I chose you. The afternoon session with Garrett was brutal. He'd set up a scenario in the urban training facility. Multiple mannequins positioned throughout a mock-up village. Some armed, some not. Rachel had to engage only hostile targets while avoiding civilians. Time pressure, stress. The sound of simulated gunfire played through speakers to add chaos. She failed the first run, shot a civilian by mistake. Garrett stopped the drill, made her walk down to the mannequin, made her look at what she'd done, a woman holding a child, both torn apart by her round. In the real world, Garrett said flatly, you just killed someone's mother, someone's daughter, created orphans, sparked revenge that might kill your brothers years from now. This is why positive target identification matters. This is why you take the extra second to be sure. Rachel stared at the mannequins. Her face was pale. I understand. Do you? Because understanding intellectually and understanding in your gut are different things. Run it again. She ran it 6 more times, failed twice more. By the 4th run, she was getting it, slowing down, confirming targets, accepting that sometimes no shot was better than a questionable shot. Sullivan watched from a distance, saw her working through the lesson. Garrett was doing good work, pushing hard but not breaking her, finding the line between pressure and cruelty. On day 20, Sullivan woke up coughing blood, more than before, enough to soak through the towel he kept by the bed. His body was beginning the final shutdown. The timeline was accelerating. He had weeks, maybe days, not the months he'd hoped for. He cleaned up, dressed, showed up at the range at 600 like always. Rachel was waiting. If she noticed how pale he looked, how his hands shook slightly, she didn't mention it. They spent the morning on wind reading. He taught her the old tricks, how to read mirage through the scope, how to use vegetation as wind indicators, how to account for thermals that changed as the sun moved. She absorbed it all, took notes, asked smart questions. Around 1100 hours, his chest seized. The cough came without warning, violent, doubling him over. Blood spattered the dirt. Rachel was there instantly, supporting him. He pushed her away. I'm fine. You're not fine. Master Sergeant, you need medical. What I need is to finish what I started. He wiped his mouth, straightened with effort. We're not done yet. Master Sergeant, please. He turned on her. The force in his voice stopped her cold. I don't have time for please. I don't have time for medical attention that will buy me another week at the cost of the week I have now. What I have is this moment, this lesson, this chance to give you what you need to survive. So you can either help me do that or you can waste both our time with sentiment. Which is it going to be? Rachel's eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. I'll help. Then get back on that rifle and show me you can read wind at 1600 meters. Because tomorrow we're going to 1800. And the day after that, 2000. And I need to know that when I'm gone, you'll be able to make shots that save lives I'll never know about. She went back to the rifle. Sullivan sat heavily on his chair, watched her work. His chest ached. His vision blurred at the edges, but she was getting it. She was learning. The legacy would continue. It had to. That evening, Lisa Chen found him in his quarters. She didn't knock, just walked in and closed the door. Sat down across from him. Hendricks says you're done. He's pulling you tomorrow. Sullivan looked up from the notebook. The hell he is. Jack, you collapsed on the range today. Carter told me. Said you coughed up enough blood to paint the dirt red. You're past the point where you can hide this. I didn't collapse. I had a moment. There's a difference. There's not. And you know it. Chen leaned forward. Look, I understand what you're trying to do. I respect it. But you're going to kill yourself trying to finish this. And that defeats the purpose. Let someone else take over her training. Garrett, maybe. He's good enough. He's not me. Sullivan's voice was hard. He doesn't have what I have. He didn't fail his son. He doesn't carry the weight of that failure every waking moment. This isn't just training, Lisa. This is redemption. And I will see it through. Even if it kills you, especially if it kills me. Because dying while building something matters. Dying in a hospital bed hooked to machines while nurses pretend to care, that's just dying. This is purpose. Chen studied him for a long moment. Finally, she stood. You've got 1 week. That's what Hendricks is giving you. 1 week to finish whatever you need to finish with Carter. After that, you are going to medical whether you like it or not. And Jack, she paused at the door, make it count. Because it's all the time you have left. She left. Sullivan sat in the gathering darkness and thought about time, about how little was left, about how much still needed to be done. 1 week, 7 days, he'd have to accelerate everything. Push Rachel harder, give her the compressed version of lessons that should take months. He pulled out his phone, called Hendricks. The colonel answered on the second ring. I need a favor, Sullivan said. Name it. Operation Titan, the POW rescue mission. Intel says it's launching in 6 weeks. That's classified information, Jack. I know. I also know you need an Overwatch team. Best shooters available. I want Carter on it. Hendricks was quiet. She's not ready. She will be. In 1 week, she'll be ready. I guarantee it. You're asking me to put an unproven sniper on the most important mission we've run in 5 years. Based on your word. Based on my legacy, I've never given you bad operators, Marcus. Not in 30 years. Trust me one more time. The silence stretched. Finally, Hendricks sighed. 1 week. If she's ready, truly ready, I'll consider it. But Jack, if you're wrong, if she fails, those POWs stay in Taliban hands. Can you live with that? I won't have to live with it. I'll be dead. But she won't fail, I promise you that. He hung up, stared at the phone. He just put enormous pressure on Rachel. Pressure she didn't know existed yet. But it was the only way. She needed a real mission, real stakes, something to prove to herself that all of this meant something. Tomorrow he'd tell her, Tomorrow, the training would shift from theoretical to practical. Tomorrow, she'd learn that everything up until now had been preparation for one moment, one mission, one chance to become what Sullivan knew she could be. He opened the notebook, started writing faster. There was so much left to teach, so much she needed to know. The words poured out, techniques and tactics and hard-won wisdom, all of it flowing onto paper like blood from a wound. Outside, night settled over Fort Bragg. Inside, an old soldier raced against time. And somewhere on the ranges, a young woman cleaned a rifle and wondered why her teacher looked at her like she was the only thing standing between him and complete darkness. 7 days. Everything had to be ready in 7 days. The clock was running, and Jack Sullivan had never been good at losing races. Day 21 began with words that changed everything. Sullivan stood at the range in the gray pre-dawn light, waiting for Rachel to arrive. His chest burned with every breath. The cancer had moved from guest to landlord, claiming more territory each day. He'd lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks. His hands trembled unless he concentrated. But concentration was a weapon he still knew how to use. Rachel appeared at 0555, punctual as always. She carried the M24 with the ease of long familiarity now. The rifle had become part of her, an extension of will and purpose. She set down her kit and waited for instructions. Sullivan didn't give them. Instead, he pulled a folder from his jacket, handed it to her, read it. She opened the folder. Her eyes moved across the pages. He watched her expression shift. Confusion, understanding, fear, then something harder, determination. Operation Titan, she said quietly. 12 prisoners of war. 3 years in Taliban custody. Rescue mission launching in 5 weeks. Sullivan nodded. JSOC is running point. Delta Force will handle the assault. They need overwatch. Long-range support. Someone who can engage targets at extreme distance in mountain terrain with variable winds and limited visibility. Someone who can make impossible shots when failure means Americans die. She looked up at him. Why are you showing me this? Because you're going as my backup. If I can't take the shot, you will. The folder trembled in her hands. Master Sergeant, I've been training for 3 weeks. These operators have years of experience. I'm not qualified for this. Qualification is a piece of paper. Capability is what matters. And Rachel, you're capable. I've made sure of that. She closed the folder. Her voice dropped. You're dying. It wasn't a question. Sullivan met her eyes, didn't flinch. Yes. How long? Does it matter? The timeline is what it is. The mission launches in 5 weeks. I'll be functional for maybe 3 of those, which means the last 2 weeks you're the primary, not me. This has always been about getting you ready for that moment. Rachel was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but her eyes held accusation. You used me this whole time, the private training, the personal attention. It wasn't about honoring your son. It was about having a replacement for yourself. Sullivan absorbed the words like rounds hitting body armor. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't entirely right either. Both things can be true. I needed someone capable, someone I could trust with a mission that matters. But Rachel, I chose you because I saw in you what I saw in Matt. Not just talent, character. The quality that makes someone worth saving, worth investing in, worth building into something greater than they know they can be. And what if I fail? What if those POWs die because I miss a shot you would have made? Then you learn from it and make sure the next ones live. That's how this works. You carry the failures and honor the successes and keep going because stopping means everyone, after gets no chance at all. He stepped closer, lowered his voice. I'm not asking you to be me. I'm asking you to be better, to take what I've taught you and build on it, to survive the missions that killed people like my son, to live long enough to pass it forward. That's the legacy, not the kills, not the medals, the knowledge that continues after we're gone. Rachel looked down at the folder, back up at Sullivan, her jaw set. What do I need to do? Everything I tell you, without question, without hesitation. We have 4 weeks to turn you from good to exceptional, from capable to irreplaceable. It's going to hurt. You're going to want to quit. I won't let you. Understood? Yes, Master Sergeant. Good. Sullivan walked into his gear bag, pulled out a different rifle, heavier, longer, more complex. This is an M2010, effective range 2,400 meters. It's what you'll use in Afghanistan. The M24 was training wheels. This is the real thing. Get familiar with it. We start extended range work today. The next 4 weeks became a crucible that refined Rachel into something harder than she'd been, something sharper. Sullivan drove her past every limit she thought she had and then showed her new ones. Days started at 0400 and ended past midnight. Range work until her shoulder was one continuous bruise. Field exercises in full kit until her legs shook. Night stalks through the woods. Urban scenarios with Garrett adding complexity and chaos. Mental preparation sessions where Sullivan talked her through the psychology of killing. The moment before, the moment after, how to compartmentalize, how to function when everything inside screamed to stop. She never complained, never asked for mercy, just absorbed and adapted and grew. On day 28, Garrett pulled Sullivan aside after a training evolution. "She's ready," the younger sergeant said. "Better than anyone in my class was at this stage, better than I was." Sullivan watched Rachel break down the M2010 for the 100th time. Muscle memory now, no wasted movement. She's ready for the physical part. The mental part we won't know until she's tested. The mission will test her. That's what I'm counting on. Sullivan paused. "I need you to do something for me, Ben." "Name it." "When I can't continue, when my body gives out, I need you to be there for her, not as a teacher, as a brother, someone she can trust when the weight gets heavy. Can you do that?" Garrett nodded slowly. "You think it'll be that hard on her?" "I know it will, because it was that hard on me, and I had years to adjust. She's getting weeks. The compression is brutal, but necessary." "I'll be there," Garrett said. "You have my word." Sullivan extended his hand. Garrett shook it. The grip lingered a moment longer than necessary, a transfer of responsibility, a passing of the torch. Day 32 brought a new element to training. Lisa Chen arrived at the range with a stack of photographs. Intelligence gathered from Operation Titan Prep, the compound where the POWs were held, the surrounding terrain, known Taliban positions, probable fields of fire. 3 weeks had passed since Sullivan first told Rachel about the mission. 3 weeks of brutal training. 3 weeks watching his body deteriorate while Rachel's skills sharpened. The original timeline had been 5 weeks from briefing to deployment. Now they were past the halfway point. Time was accelerating, running out. Rachel studied each image with the intensity of someone memorizing holy text. Sullivan guided her through the analysis, teaching her to read terrain through photographs, to identify sniper positions, to calculate angles and distances from shadows and known objects. This was the art beyond the science, the intuition built on experience. "Your hide site will be here." Sullivan pointed to a ridge 1,500 meters from the compound. Rocky outcrop, good concealment, clear sight lines to 3 of the 4 compound walls. But the wind in these mountains is unpredictable. Channeled through valleys, creates eddies and thermals. You'll have maybe 2 seconds to read it and adjust before the shot. How do I prepare for unpredictable conditions? You don't prepare, you adapt. Trust your training. Trust your instincts. And Rachel, he met her eyes. "Trust that I wouldn't put you in this position if I didn't believe absolutely that you can do it." She held his gaze. "I won't let you down, Master Sergeant. I know you won't. Because failure isn't in your vocabulary. Not anymore." That night, Sullivan collapsed in his quarters. No warning. Just standing one moment and on the floor the next. He came to with Chen kneeling over him, checking his pulse. Her face was professionally calm, but her eyes told the truth. "How long was I out?" 90 seconds. Her voice was crisp. "Medical, you're done, Jack. No arguments, no negotiations. I'm calling Hendricks right now." Sullivan pushed himself up, sat with his back against the wall. The room tilted, but he breathed through it. "Not yet. 3 more days. She needs 3 more days. You need a hospital. I need to finish what I started." He coughed, tasted copper, swallowed it. 3 days, Lisa. Then I'll go, I promise." Chen stared at him. Finally, she stood. 3 days. But you train sitting down. No more standing evolutions. And if you collapse again, the deal is off. Those are my terms. Accepted. She left. Sullivan stayed on the floor for another 10 minutes, gathering strength. The body was quitting, but the mind remained sharp. Sharp enough to get through 3 more days. Sharp enough to give Rachel the last pieces of the puzzle. Day 33. Sullivan sat in a chair at the range, rifle across his lap, and talked Rachel through advanced wind-reading techniques. Methods he'd developed over 30 years. Tricks that weren't in any manual. How to use mirage as a precise indicator. How to feel pressure changes that signaled wind shifts. how to read animal behavior, birds, insects, the way grass moved in patterns that told stories about air currents. She listened like he was describing the map to buried treasure, because in a way he was. This was knowledge bought with blood, refined through 100 missions, worth more than gold to someone who understood its value. Day 34. Chen arrived at dawn with urgent news. Her expression told Sullivan everything before she spoke. The mission had been accelerated. What should have been 2 more weeks of preparation had become days. Intelligence intercepts suggested the Taliban were planning to move the prisoners within 72 hours. JSOC had no choice. The window was closing faster than anyone had anticipated. The assault launches in 1 week. Chen's voice was tight. Not 2 weeks. Not the timeline we planned for. 1 week, 7 days. Sullivan absorbed this without visible reaction. But inside, something cracked. 1 week. He'd need every hour of it. The training wasn't complete. Rachel wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. But ready was a luxury they no longer had. Sullivan absorbed this without visible reaction. But inside, something cracked. 1 week. He'd need every hour of it. The training wasn't complete. Rachel wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. But ready was a luxury they no longer had. He turned to Rachel. Her face had gone pale, the color draining as the reality hit. 1 week. Not the 2 weeks she'd been counting on. Not the gradual buildup she'd mentally prepared for. 1 week until everything they'd trained for became real. "You're ready now instead of ready then," Sullivan said. His voice was steady despite the chaos in his chest. "Makes no difference. Ready is a state of mind, not a date on a calendar." "But Master Sergeant, I need more time." "Time is a luxury. Combat doesn't care about your training schedule." He leaned forward despite the pain it caused. "Listen to me. You have everything you need right here." He tapped her temple. "And here." He touched her chest above her heart. "The rest is just noise, doubt, fear. The voice that tells you you're not good enough. Ignore it. That voice is a liar." "What if the voice is right? Then you'll fail and learn and be better next time." "But Rachel, that voice isn't right. I've seen you shoot. I've seen you adapt. I've seen you become someone I would trust my life to. Hell, I am trusting my life to you. Because when I'm on that ridge and my body fails and you have to take over, those POWs depend on you being exactly who you've become. A warrior, a protector, someone who changes the math." Her hands were shaking. Sullivan reached out, placed his weathered palm over her trembling fingers. "Steady. You've got this. I wouldn't lie to you. Not about this. Not when it matters this much." She took a breath, held it, let it out slow. The shaking stopped. He watched the transformation happen in real time. Fear converting to determination. Doubt burning away in the fire of purpose. "Okay," she said. 1 week. I'll be ready." "You already are. You just didn't know it yet." Day 35 brought Staff Sergeant Derek Cole into the picture. He was 31, cocky, talented, and resentful that an unproven logistics specialist was getting the opportunity he thought he deserved. He showed up at the range with attitude wrapped in proper military courtesy. "Corporal Carter." Cole's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Heard you're going to Afghanistan. Congratulations." Rachel was cleaning the M2010. Didn't look up. "Thank you, Sergeant. Must be nice. Having connections. Getting opportunities based on who trains you instead of what you have earned." Now she looked up, met his gaze. "I've earned every round I've fired, every lesson I've learned. If you have a problem with that, take it up with Master Sergeant Sullivan." Cole glanced at Sullivan sitting 20 feet away. The old man watched with half-closed eyes. Listening. Evaluating. Cole turned back to Rachel. "No problem. Just wanted to welcome you to the team. We'll be working together as Overwatch. Hope you can keep up." He walked away. Rachel returned to cleaning her rifle, but her jaw was tight. Sullivan spoke without opening his eyes fully. He's scared. Rachel looked over. Of what? Of being shown up by someone he spent years looking down on. You represent everything his ego can't accept. That talent isn't about time served. It's about dedication and heart. He'll either get over it or he won't. Either way, it's his problem, not yours. What if we have to work together? What if his resentment gets people killed? Then you compensate. Cover his mistakes. Be so good he has no choice but to respect you. Or at the very least, stay out of your way. Sullivan finally opened his eyes fully. But Rachel, remember this. The mission matters more than anyone's pride, including yours. including his. If he needs help, you help him. If he screws up, you fix it. That's what professionals do. Yes, Master Sergeant. The final 6 days blurred past in a haze of compressed preparation. Every hour counted now. Every minute carried weight it hadn't before. Gear checks, mission briefings, intelligence updates. Rachel absorbed it all. Sullivan watched her confidence grow, watched her stop questioning herself, watched her become the operator he'd built her to be. The timeline acceleration had changed everything. What should have been methodical became frantic. What should have been thorough became abbreviated. But Sullivan had learned long ago that war never waited for perfect preparation. You trained until you ran out of time. Then you went anyway. Trust in the fundamentals. Adapt to chaos. Survive through will. On day 40, Hendricks called a full mission brief. The assault team assembled in a secure room, 20 operators from Delta Force, 4 from Overwatch. Sullivan, Rachel, Garrett, Cole. Maps covered the walls. Satellite imagery, terrain models. The planning was meticulous, every contingency considered, every angle calculated. The compound sat in a valley in Paktia province. Mud brick walls, single story, 4 guards visible in recent surveillance, likely more inside. The 12 POWs were being held in the north building. Intel from local sources confirmed they were alive but in poor condition, malnourished, some injured, all traumatized. The assault plan was textbook. Infiltrate at night. Helicopter insertion 5 kilometers out. Approach on foot. Overwatch establishes position on Ridge 4, 1,500 meters northeast. When in position, assault team breaches. Overwatch eliminates sentries and provides cover during extraction. Helicopter exfil at LZ 2 clicks south. Total time in target area, 40 minutes. Simple plan, complex execution. Hendricks walked them through timing, communications protocols, contingencies. His voice was calm, professional. But when he looked at Sullivan, something else showed in his eyes. Concern. Knowledge that this mission was more than a rescue. It was a final act. The briefing ended. The teams dispersed to final preparations. Sullivan found Rachel outside, staring at the night sky. Second thoughts, he asked. She shook her head. Just thinking about those 12 people. 3 years in captivity, everything they have endured. The hope they've lost, the families waiting for them. It's a lot of weight. Good weight, the kind that gives purpose. You're not just a sniper on this mission. You're the answer to someone's prayer, someone's mother, someone's wife. Remember that when the pressure builds, you're not there to prove anything. You're there to bring people home. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then, Master Sergeant, what happens if you can't make the shot? If your body fails in the middle of the mission? Then you step up without hesitation, without doubt. You take the rifle and you do what needs to be done. Because those POWs don't care who pulls the trigger. They care that someone does. Sullivan paused. And Rachel, when that moment comes, because it will come, don't think about me. Don't let concern for my condition distract you. I'm an old man at the end of a long road. Those prisoners are young men with futures ahead. Save them. Let me go. Promise me that. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I promise. Good. Now get some rest. We fly out in 36 hours. The next day brought medical screening for the mission, required for everyone deploying. Sullivan knew he'd fail, knew they'd pull him, but he had one card left to play. Chen had agreed to run his screening herself. She owed him that much. They met in the medical building. She took his vitals without speaking. Blood pressure high, heart rate irregular, temperature elevated. Every number screamed that he was unfit for deployment. She wrote them down, stared at the chart. I should disqualify you right now. Sullivan met her eyes, but you won't. She set down her pen, leaned back. Why? Give me one good reason why I should sign off on this. Why I should let a dying man go into combat where he could get not just himself killed, but everyone depending on him. Because I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for her. Rachel needs me there, not to take the shots. She can do that. But to be the calm in the storm, the steady voice when everything is calm, the reminder that she's capable. I'll sit in a hide site and spot. I'll make wind calls. I'll do everything that doesn't require physical exertion. And if I can't, Garrett is there. But my presence matters. It's the final piece of her preparation. Chen closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were hard. If you compromise this mission, if your condition causes failures that cost lives, that's on me. I cleared you. I'll carry that. I know. And I wouldn't ask if I thought the risk outweighed the benefit. But Lisa, trust me one more time. I've been doing this for 36 years. I know my limits. I know when I'm a liability. I'm not there yet. She picked up the pen, signed the form. You're cleared. God help us both. Sullivan stood, offered his hand. She shook it. Her grip was tight, angry, but she didn't take it back. The final night before deployment, Sullivan couldn't sleep. He sat at the small desk in his quarters and finished the notebook. The last pages filled with wisdom he'd forgotten to include. Technical details, mental preparation, how to deal with the aftermath, how to live with the ghosts, how to find meaning in the wait. He sealed it in an envelope, wrote Rachel's name on the front, added a note. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Everything in these pages is yours now. Learn it, use it, pass it forward. Don't let the knowledge die. Don't let the sacrifices be meaningless. Be better than I was. Live longer than my son. And Rachel, know that choosing you was the best decision I made in the last decade of my life. You gave me purpose when I thought I had none left. Thank you for that. Make me proud. Jack Sullivan. He placed the envelope in his footlocker, next to his dress uniform, next to the folded flag they'd give Rachel when he was gone. Everything in order. Everything prepared. At 0300 hours, the teams assembled on the tarmac. 2 helicopters waited, engines warming, rotors beginning their lazy rotation. Sullivan stood in full kit, 80 pounds of gear that felt like 800, but he stood. That was what mattered. Rachel approached, also in full kit, the M2010 in a drag bag across her back. She looked different, harder, ready, the transformation complete. Last chance to back out, Sullivan said. Not a chance. Good. He adjusted the strap on her chest rig. Remember everything. Trust your training. And Rachel, when the moment comes, don't hesitate. Hesitation kills. Certainty saves. I'll remember. Garrett joined them. Then Cole, still radiating resentment, but professional enough to hide it under discipline. The 4 Overwatch operators, the last line of defense between success and catastrophic failure. Hendricks appeared, shook each of their hands, looked longest at Sullivan. Bring them home, Jack. That's the plan. The helicopters lifted into the darkness. The base fell away below. Sullivan watched the lights fade, wondered if he'd see them again, decided it didn't matter. This was where he was supposed to be, doing what he was meant to do, the only work that had ever truly mattered. Beside him, Rachel stared out the window. Her face was calm, resolved. She'd become the warrior he'd built. Now came the test. Now came the fire. Afghanistan waited below. Mountains and valleys and hidden enemies. 12 prisoners counting on rescue. 4 snipers carrying the weight of their survival. Sullivan closed his eyes, felt the helicopter vibrate around him, felt his body protesting every movement, felt the cancer eating him from inside, but also felt something else. Peace. Purpose. The knowledge that whatever happened next, he'd done what he set out to do. He'd created something that would outlast him. A legacy that mattered. The desert dawn was still hours away, but in his mind, Sullivan could already see it, could see Rachel behind the rifle, making the shots he'd taught her to make, saving lives he'd never know, carrying forward the knowledge he'd spent a lifetime accumulating. That was immortality, not the medals or the kill count or the stories. The knowledge passed down, the warrior built from nothing into everything, the legacy that refused to die. The helicopters flew on through the darkness, and Jack Sullivan flew with them. One last mission, one last chance to matter, one last opportunity to prove that the sum of a life wasn't measured in years, but in what you left behind. He opened his eyes, looked at Rachel. She felt his gaze, turned. Their eyes met. No words needed. She nodded once, he returned it. The understanding passed between them. Teacher and student, father and daughter in everything but blood. 2 warriors bound by purpose and sacrifice, and the unbreakable bond of those who choose to stand between evil and the innocent. The mission was beginning. The crucible was here, and whatever came next, they would face it together. Until his body failed and hers continued. until his story ended and hers reached new chapters, until the legacy passed fully from dying hands to living ones. That was how it should be. That was how it had always been. The old making way for the new, the dying ensuring the living carried forward. The ghost teaching one final student before fading into whatever came after. Sullivan settled back in his seat, let the exhaustion take him, closed his eyes and drifted, dreaming of mountains, of wind calls, of impossible shots made possible, of his son, of this new daughter he'd found, of the moment when one story ended and another began. The helicopters flew on, carrying them toward dawn, toward the fire, toward everything that waited in the darkness ahead. The Hindu Kush mountains rose like broken teeth against the starlit sky. 15,000 feet of rock and ice and hidden death. The helicopters flew low through the valleys, rotors beating a rhythm that matched Sullivan's failing heart. 4 hours from base to insert point, 4 hours of darkness and vibration, and the knowledge that some of them wouldn't be coming back. Sullivan checked his gear for the third time. Ritual, comfort, the familiar weight of equipment that had kept him alive through 3 wars. But this time felt different, final. His hands moved through the checks with muscle memory older than Rachel's entire life. Magazine seated, chamber clear, optics tight, rangefinder charged, everything ready. Everything except the body carrying it all. The cancer had been quiet during the flight, resting, gathering strength for the betrayal Sullivan knew was coming. He could feel it waiting, patient, inevitable, but not yet. Not for a few more hours. He just needed a few more hours. Rachel sat across from him, eyes closed but not sleeping, preparing mentally, running through scenarios. Sullivan recognized the signs. He'd done the same thing 1,000 times. The internal rehearsal that turned chaos into choreography. She was ready as anyone could be for what waited below. Garrett caught his eye, gave a slight nod. The younger sergeant understood his role. When Sullivan fell and he would fall, Garrett would step in, not as replacement, but as support, making sure Rachel didn't face the storm alone. It was as good a backup plan as Sullivan could arrange. Cole sat separately, checking his rifle with sharp, angry movements. Still resentful, still convinced he deserved Rachel's slot. Sullivan had seen that attitude before. Sometimes it pushed soldiers to excel. Sometimes it got them killed. Time would tell which path Cole would choose. The helicopter banked hard left. The crew chief held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes to insertion. The assault team stirred. 20 Delta operators who'd done this dance so many times it was routine. Except it wasn't. 12 Americans had been prisoners for 3 years. 12 men who'd given up hope of rescue. Tonight that changed. Tonight hope came wrapped in night vision and suppressed gunfire. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset. LZ in sight, no visible hostiles. Wind from the east at 12 knots, temperature 40 degrees, good hunting. The helicopters flared, touched down. The assault team poured out into the darkness. Weapons up, moving with the fluid precision of hundreds of hours training together. The Overwatch team followed. 4 shooters, 4 drag bags containing the rifles that could reach out and touch someone 1,500 meters away. The helicopters lifted immediately. Dust and noise, and then silence. Just wind and breathing and the crunch of boots on rocky ground. They were committed now. No extraction until the mission was complete or catastrophically failed. No middle ground. The assault team leader, a captain named Dixon, moved them out. The compound was 5 kilometers northeast. They had 3 hours to get into position before sunrise. 3 hours to cross terrain that wanted to kill them even without enemy contact. Steep ravines, loose scree, 1,000-foot drops hidden in darkness. One wrong step meant death. Sullivan felt it in the first kilometer. His legs turning to lead, his lungs burning with each breath. The altitude didn't help. 15,000 feet meant 30% less oxygen. For a healthy man, difficult. For a dying one, agony. But he pushed through, focused on the next step, then the next. Nothing beyond that. Just movement, just progress. Rachel moved ahead of him. Strong, sure-footed, she'd become something he recognized. A weapon given human form, focused entirely on the mission. No wasted energy on fear or doubt. Good. That would keep her alive when things went wrong, and things always went wrong. 2 hours in, they reached the ridge. Ridge 4 on the maps. A rocky outcrop with good concealment and clear sight lines to the compound below. 1,500 meters. Sullivan had made shots at that distance 100 times, but always before his body had cooperated. Now it was enemy territory. Hostile. Unreliable. The Overwatch team split into two positions. Sullivan and Rachel on the primary hide. Garrett and Cole 50 meters west as backup. They dug in, arranged rocks for cover, set up camouflage netting, became part of the landscape. The work took an hour. By the time they finished, Sullivan was shaking. Not from cold, from exhaustion that came from fighting a war inside his own cells. Rachel noticed, handed him water without comment. He drank. The liquid felt like swallowing glass. Everything hurt now. The cancer had woken fully, was making its presence known, reminding him who was really in control. The eastern sky began to gray. Dawn was coming. Sullivan pulled out his spotting scope, glassed the compound. Mud brick walls, single story, 4 guards visible, 2 on the roof, 2 at the entrance. Sloppy security, overconfident. They'd held these prisoners for 3 years without rescue attempts, had stopped expecting one. Mistake. Rachel set up the M2010, checked 0, dialed in the elevation. The rifle was ready. Now they waited for the assault team to get into position. Waited for the radio call that would turn waiting into action, turn preparation into execution. Sullivan's radio crackled. Overwatch, this is Dixon, in position. Give me a status check. Overwatch primary, we have eyes on target. 4 guards visible. 0 movement inside compound. Wind east at 10 knots, range 1,500 meters. We are green. Garrett's voice followed. Overwatch secondary, same status. We are green. Dixon's voice came back calm. Solid. Mission launch in 10 minutes. On my mark, eliminate sentries. Weapons free on confirmed hostiles only. Remember, 12 friendlies inside. Positive ID before you engage. Copy all, Sullivan said. He turned to Rachel. This is it. Everything we trained for. You remember the sequence? Engage rooftop guards first. They have the high ground and best visibility. Then entrance guards. Then any reinforcements. Positive ID on every shot. And good. Sullivan adjusted his spotting scope. I'll call wind and distance. You make the shots. When I can't continue, you take over completely. No hesitation. Those POWs are counting on us. I won't let them down. I know you won't. He paused. Rachel, whatever happens up here, you did everything right. You became everything I hoped you'd be. Be proud of that. She looked at him. Her eyes were hard, but something moved behind them. Thank you, Master Sergeant, for everything. Thank you for giving an old man purpose in his last days. Now let's bring those boys home. The 10 minutes crawled past. Sullivan watched the compound through his scope, memorizing details, patterns. The guards changed position every few minutes, not on a set schedule, casual, unprofessional, good for the assault, bad for the prisoners if the Taliban decided killing hostages was easier than defending them. Dixon's voice cut through the silence. All units, stand by. 5 seconds. Sullivan keyed his radio. Overwatch ready. Execute, execute, execute. Rachel settled behind the rifle, found the first target. Rooftop guard, male, mid-20s, a K-47 slung across his back. He was smoking, relaxed, unaware these were his last seconds of life. Sullivan called it. 1,500 meters. Wind left to right, 10 knots. Temperature 40 degrees. Target stationary. Engage when ready. Rachel breathed. 4 counts in, hold, 4 counts out. The rifle cracked. The sound echoed off the mountains. 1,500 meters away, the guard's head snapped back. He dropped, dead before he knew he was dying. Good kill. Second target, rooftop moving right to left. Rachel worked the bolt. Brass ejected, she chambered another round. Found the second guard. He'd heard the shot, was turning, confused, looking for the source. He had maybe 2 seconds of life remaining. The rifle spoke again. The second guard went down. 2 shots, 2 kills, textbook. Sullivan shifted his scope to the compound entrance. The third guard was alerting. Monyam, turning, raising his weapon, scanning the ridge, smart enough to guess the direction, not smart enough to take cover. Entrance guard, alert, moving. Rachel tracked him, compensated for movement, squeezed. The round took him center mass. He spun, fell, Didn't move. Fourth guard running for cover. Call it. 1470 meters. Wind shift now 8 knots. Target moving fast, left to right. Rachel led the target. Fired. Miss. Low. The guard made it behind the wall. Adjust. He'll pop up in 3 seconds. Be ready. Rachel chambered another round. Waited. The guard appeared, firing wildly toward the ridge, wasting ammunition on hope and fear. Rachel didn't waste anything. Her shot was precise. Final. The guard dropped. 4 down. Sullivan keyed the radio. All sentries eliminated. Compound is clear for breach. The assault team moved. Fast. Professional. They'd rehearsed this 100 times. The demolition charge blew the main door. Flashbangs followed. Then operators pouring through. Controlled chaos. Room by room. Systematic. Gunfire erupted inside. Not from the assault team. From deeper in the compound. More Taliban than expected. The intel had been incomplete. 4 guards outside. At least a dozen inside. The math had changed. Dixon's voice came through tense. Contact. Multiple hostiles. We're pinned in the main room. Need suppression on the north building. Repeat. North building. Targets firing from windows. Sullivan swung his scope. Saw muzzle flashes from 3 windows. Taliban fighters using the prisoner building as a fortress. Smart. Cruel. If the assault team returned fire, they'd risk hitting the POWs. Rachel, north building, 3 windows. Take them. She shifted her aim, found the first window, fired. The muzzle flash stopped. Second window, fired. Another kill. Third window. The fighter had seen his companions fall. Ducked back. Smart. Hold position. He'll return fire. 30 seconds passed. The fighter reappeared. Different window. Trying to outthink them. Rachel was already there. Waiting. She fired. The fighter fell back into darkness. Good kills. Sullivan felt his chest seize. The cough came without warning. Violent. He turned away from the scope, covered his mouth. Blood, more than before. The mission was taking everything he had left. Master Sergeant? Rachel's voice carried concern. I'm fine. Keep shooting. More targets. East side. She engaged, dropped 2 more Taliban who'd emerged from a side building. The assault team used the opening, pushed forward, reached the north building where the prisoners were held. The radio crackled with crosstalk. Breaching now. Prisoners located, 12 souls. Condition poor but alive. Prepare for exfil. Sullivan allowed himself a moment of relief. They'd found them. Alive. Mission nearly complete. Just had to get them out. That's when everything fell apart. A voice Sullivan didn't recognize came through on the Taliban frequency they'd been monitoring. Pashto. Fast. Urgent. The translator on the assault team broke in. Contact report. Enemy reinforcements inbound from the valley. Approximately 60 fighters. ETA 10 minutes. Dixon's voice cut through. Overwatch. We need time. Delay those reinforcements. Whatever it takes. Sullivan glassed the valley. Saw them. A convoy of trucks. Too many, too fast. The Overwatch team couldn't stop 60 fighters. They could only slow them. By minutes. Maybe enough, maybe not. He keyed the radio. Garrett, Cole, target the lead vehicles. Disable them. Create a traffic jam. Copy. Engaging now. The 2 backup snipers opened fire. Sullivan watched through his scope as the lead truck's windshield exploded. The vehicle swerved, crashed into a ditch. The convoy stopped. Confused, searching for the threat. Good. Confusion bought time. But 60 fighters with only 4 snipers against them. The math was brutal. They needed more. Needed something to even the odds. Rachel spoke quietly. Master Sergeant, I can flank south, get an angle on the convoy's rear. Create crossfire. Too dangerous. You'd be exposed. We're out of safe options. Either we stop them or the assault team gets caught in the compound. 12 prisoners, 20 operators, 32 lives depending on us buying time. Sullivan knew she was right. Hated it. But right was right regardless of cost. Go. Fast and quiet. I'll cover from here. She grabbed her rifle, moved, disappeared into the rocks like smoke. Sullivan watched her go, felt something tear in his chest that wasn't cancer. Pride, fear, love for this warrior he'd built, this daughter he'd found too late. The convoy had recovered. Fighters dismounting, spreading out. Smart tactics, harder to target. Sullivan found a cluster of 3. Fired, dropped one. The others scattered. Garrett got another. Cole missed, cursed over the radio. 60 became 58. Still impossible odds. Rachel's voice came through. In position. I have rear angle. 8 targets visible. Engage at will. So you press and displace. Don't let them fix your position. Her rifle cracked in the distance. Sullivan couldn't see her but heard the results. Shouts from the convoy. Return fire. Tracers arcing into the rocks where she'd been. But she was already moving. Ghost tactics. The way he taught her. The convoy tried to advance. Sullivan made them pay for it. Every fighter who broke cover became a target. He was firing faster now. Less precise. But volume had value when precision wasn't enough. The M2010 cracked steadily. Brass piled at his feet. Each shot bought seconds. Seconds became minutes. Minutes became hope. His body was failing catastrophically. He could feel it. The cancer spreading like fire through dry grass. His vision blurred. His hands shook. The rifle wavered. But he kept shooting. Kept buying time. Kept doing the only thing that mattered. Dixon's voice. Prisoners loaded. Moving to exfil point. 3 minutes out. 3 minutes. Sullivan had to give them 3 minutes. Could his body last 3 minutes? No choice. It had to. The convoy commander was smart. Split his force. Half continued toward the compound. Half turned to hunt the snipers. 20 fighters moving up the ridge. Coming for Sullivan's position. Coming fast. Garrett saw it. Overwatch primary, you've got hostiles climbing toward you. 20 plus. We're shifting to intercept. Negative. Hold position. Cover the exfil. I'll handle this. Jack, you can't handle 20 fighters alone. Sullivan smiled despite the blood in his mouth. Watch me. He shifted his rifle. Closer targets now. 300 meters in closing. The fighters were using cover. Moving in pairs. Professional. But professional didn't matter when you were climbing toward a man with nothing left to lose. Sullivan fired. Dropped the point man. Fired again. His partner. The advance stalled. They'd found hard cover. Smart. But it pinned them. Kept them from reaching the ridge. Bought more time. His radio crackled. Rachel's voice. Master Sergeant, I'm coming back. You need support. Negative. Stay on the convoy. Keep them suppressed. I can help. You are helping. You're doing your job. Now let me do mine. The finality in his voice stopped her protest. Sullivan returned to shooting. The world narrowed to scope picture. Target. Trigger. Repeat. His body screamed, his vision grayed at the edges, but the rifle kept speaking, kept delivering messages of lead and finality. 15 fighters became 12. 12 became 8. They were learning, taking better cover, advancing more carefully, but advancing nonetheless. 200 meters now. Close enough Sullivan could see faces. Young men, someone's sons, fighting for a cause they believed in, just like he'd fought for his. He felt no hatred, just the cold necessity of math. Them or us, the prisoners or the enemy. Simple equations written in blood. The cough took him, doubled him over. The rifle clattered against rocks. Blood sprayed across the scope. Sullivan couldn't stop it, couldn't breathe. His lungs were drowning. The cancer had chosen this moment for its final victory. He forced himself upright, wiped the scope with shaking hands, found another target, fired. Miss. The body was done taking orders. The hands that had killed 168 men couldn't hold steady for 169. Dixon's voice, exfil point reached. Loading prisoners now. 90 seconds to wheels up. 90 seconds. Sullivan had to last 90 seconds, had to keep the fighters pinned, had to finish what he started. He fired again. Hit. One more down. The rifle bolt stuck. Brass jammed in the chamber. His fingers fumbled, couldn't clear it. The weapon he'd trusted for 30 years had failed. Or more accurately, the man behind it had failed. The fighter saw his fire stop, surge forward, 50 meters, 40, coming fast now, sensing victory. Sullivan dropped the rifle, drew his sidearm, a Beretta M9, 15 rounds, nowhere near enough, but enough for what came next. He keyed the radio one last time. Rachel, this is Sullivan. Mission complete. You did everything right. Don't look back. Don't come for me. Get on that helicopter and live. That's an order. That's my final wish. Make it count. Master Sergeant, no. We can extract you. We can... The transmission cut as Sullivan turned off his radio. He didn't want to hear her protest. Didn't want her voice breaking as she realized what he was doing. This was his choice. his ending, on his terms. The fighters were 30 meters away. Sullivan stood, left the cover of the rocks, walked into the open, weapon raised. They saw him, a lone figure, old, dying, defiant. They hesitated, just for a second, confused by such obvious suicide. That second was all Sullivan needed. He fired. 3-round burst. Dropped the lead fighter. Shifted. Fired again. Another down. They returned fire. Rounds cracked past his head. One caught his shoulder. Spun him. He stayed on his feet. Kept shooting. The M9 clicked empty. Sullivan dropped the magazine. Reloaded. Muscle memory from 10,000 repetitions. The new magazine seated. He chambered around. Fired. 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 More hits on him now. Leg, side, chest. Each impact drove him back a step. But he didn't fall. Wouldn't fall. Not yet. Not while ammunition remained and breath filled his lungs, and these final seconds could buy Rachel and the prisoners time to escape. The second magazine emptied. Sullivan reached for a third. His hands wouldn't cooperate. Numb. Distant. The blood loss was catastrophic. He looked down, saw red spreading across his chest. So much red. The fighters were 10 meters away. Weapons raised. Victory in their eyes. Sullivan smiled, blood on his teeth, because behind him, he heard it. The sound of helicopter rotors. The assault team lifting off. The prisoners safe. The mission complete. He'd done it. Bought the time. Paid the price. Finished the last operation. The fighters opened fire. Multiple weapons. Point-blank range. Sullivan felt the impacts like hammer blows. Felt his legs give out. Felt the mountain rising up to meet him. The last thing he saw was the sky. Dawn breaking over the Hindu Kush. Pink and gold and beautiful. A good sky to die under. He hit the ground. The world faded, but not to black. To something else, something that looked like his son, Matt, smiling, reaching out, saying words Sullivan couldn't quite hear but understood anyway. "Welcome home, Dad. You did good. You can rest now." Sullivan reached back, took his son's hand, let go of the pain, let go of the weight, let go of everything except the knowledge that he'd mattered, that his life had counted, that Rachel would carry forward what he'd taught her. The Ghost of Baghdad faded, but the legacy remained. 3 kilometers away, in a helicopter climbing towards safety, Rachel Carter sat with tears streaming down her face. The radio transmission had cut, but she'd heard enough, understood enough, knew what Sullivan had done, what he'd sacrificed. Garrett sat beside her, put a hand on her shoulder, said nothing. No words existed for this moment. Through the helicopter window, Rachel watched smoke rising from the ridge, heard the distant gunfire stop, knew it was over, knew the man who'd saved her, trained her, given her purpose, was gone. One of the rescued prisoners, a Marine sergeant named Williams, leaned over. His face was gaunt. 3 years of captivity written in scars and hollow eyes. But his voice was steady. "That was for us, wasn't it? Whoever just died, they died buying us time." Rachel couldn't speak, just nodded. Williams was quiet for a moment. Then, "I don't know who they were, but I'll remember them. We all will. For the rest of our lives, we'll remember someone thought we were worth dying for." Rachel looked down at her hands, still shaking, still covered in dust from the hide site where she'd lain next to a dying man who'd given her everything. She thought about the notebook waiting in his footlocker, the knowledge written down for her, the legacy passed forward. She thought about Sullivan's last words. Make it count. She would. She absolutely would. Every shot she took from this day forward, every student she trained, every life she saved or protected, all of it would honor the man who'd built her into a warrior. The helicopter flew on, carrying the rescued, carrying the survivors, carrying the living legacy of a ghost who'd finally found peace. Behind them, the sun rose fully over Afghanistan, light spilling across mountains that had drunk blood for thousands of years. And on a ridge 1,500 meters from a mud brick compound, an old soldier lay still. His war finally over, his mission finally complete, his legacy finally secured. Jack Sullivan had gone home, and he'd left behind someone who would make sure his death meant something, someone who would carry the weight, someone who would change the math. Rachel Carter closed her eyes, let the tears fall, made a promise to the man who'd saved her. "I won't let you down, Master Sergeant. I'll be better. I'll live longer. I'll pass it forward, just like you taught me." The helicopter banked west, toward safety, toward home, toward whatever came next. And Rachel flew with it, a warrior forged in fire, a legacy made flesh, the answer to an old man's final prayer. The operation was over, but the story was just beginning. Arlington National Cemetery looked different in winter. Bare trees, gray ski, rows of white headstones marching into the distance like silent soldiers still standing watch. Rachel Carter stood before a fresh grave, dress blues crisp despite the cold wind cutting through the Virginia morning. The folded flag in her hands weighed more than any rifle she'd ever carried. 2 weeks had passed since Afghanistan. 2 weeks since she'd watched smoke rise from a ridge and known the man who'd built her into a warrior was gone. 2 weeks since 12 prisoners came home and one teacher didn't. The math still felt wrong, always would. The funeral had been full military honors. 3 volleys, taps played on a bugle that made grown men weep. A chaplain who'd never met Sullivan but spoke words about sacrifice and service that rang hollow because words couldn't capture what the man had been, what he'd meant, what he'd done in those final moments. 400 people attended, generals and privates, operators from 3 decades of war, students Sullivan had trained, lives he'd saved, each one a testament to a legacy measured not in years but in impact. Rachel had stood at attention through it all, hadn't cried, couldn't. The grief was too big for tears, too profound for any single expression. But now, alone except for the graves and the wind, she felt it breaking through. The weight she'd been holding back, the loss she'd been too busy surviving to process. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the headstone, cold marble under her palm. Solid, real, final. Master Sergeant Jack Sullivan, born 1967, died 2025. Medal of Honor, Navy Cross, 3 silver stars, beloved father, dedicated teacher, American hero. The words carved in stone felt insufficient. How did you summarize a life like his in a few lines? How did you capture the man who'd taken a broken logistics specialist and forged her into something capable of the impossible? You didn't. You couldn't. You just stood there with a folded flag and wished you'd said thank you one more time. A voice spoke behind her. He'd want you standing, not kneeling. Rachel straightened, turned. Colonel Marcus Hendricks stood 10 feet back. Gray hair, tired eyes. A man who'd known Sullivan for 34 years. Who'd been there in Iraq when the legend began. Who'd given the old ghost one last mission. Sir, Rachel's voice was steadier than she felt. Hendricks stepped closer, looked at the headstone. We buried him next to his son. Seemed right. They're together now. Rachel followed his gaze, saw the neighboring grave. Second Lieutenant Matthew Sullivan, born 2003, died 2025. Medal of Honor. The dates hit hard. Matt had been 22 when he died, same age as some of the POWs they'd rescued. A life barely started before it ended saving others. Sullivan told me about Matt, Rachel said quietly. About the grenade, about choosing his men over himself. Hendricks nodded. Jack spent the last 6 years blaming himself for that. Thought if he'd been there, been a better father, maybe Matt would have made a different choice. Lived instead of died. It ate at him. Until he found you. Me? You gave him purpose. A chance to do for you what he couldn't do for his son. To build a warrior who would survive. Who would pass forward the knowledge instead of dying young with it. He saw Matt in you. The potential. The heart. But he also saw someone he could teach to make different choices. Smarter choices. Choices that kept you breathing. Rachel looked at the 2 graves side by side. Father and son. Teacher and student. The pattern repeating. The legacy continuing. I don't know if I can do what he did, be what he was. He didn't want you to be him. Hendricks turned to face her fully. He wanted you to be better. To learn from his mistakes. To live longer. Fight smarter. And Rachel, he left you something to help with that. The colonel pulled an envelope from his jacket. Heavy, sealed with wax. Rachel recognized the handwriting on the front. Her name in Sullivan's careful script. He gave this to Lisa Chen 3 days before the mission. Said if he didn't come back, you should have it. Said it contained everything he couldn't say in person. Everything you'd need to carry forward. Rachel took the envelope. Her hands shook slightly. This was it. Sullivan's last words. His final lesson. Everything he'd wanted her to know but ran out of time to teach. She wanted to open it immediately, wanted to wait forever, wanted the man back instead of his words on paper. "Thank you, sir." Hendricks nodded. "One more thing." He reached into his other pocket, pulled out a small wooden box, opened it. Inside lay a silver badge, sniper qualification, but not the standard issue. This one was worn, tarnished, old. Sullivan's original badge from when he qualified in 1989. He wore it for 36 years. Through 3 wars, never replaced it, said it reminded him where he started. Lisa Chen found it in his effects. Thought you should have it. Rachel stared at the badge, touched it with one finger. The metal was smooth from decades of wear, from being polished and pinned and carried through every deployment, every mission, every moment that built the legend. And now it was hers. The weight of that felt crushing and sacred all at once. "I'll earn it," she said. "You already did. On that ridge in Afghanistan, you became what he built you to be. Now you just have to stay that way for the next 30 years. For all the students who'll need you like you needed him." Hendricks stepped back, rendered a salute. Sharp, precise. Rachel returned it. The colonel held it a moment longer than regulation, then dropped his hand, turned, walked away through the headstones, left Rachel alone with the graves and the envelope and the weight of everything that came next. She stood there for another hour, talking to Sullivan, to Matt, to the cold wind that carried her words away. She told them about the mission, about the 12 men who came home alive, about the moment she'd wanted to disobey orders and go back for him, about the promise she'd made in the helicopter. Finally, as the sun began its descent, she placed the folded flag on Sullivan's grave. Next to it, she set a single brass casing, the first round she'd fired in combat, the shot that started everything, the beginning of the transformation from student to warrior. "I'll make you proud, Master Sergeant. Every day, every mission, every student, you'll live through all of it. That's my promise. That's my oath." She walked away without looking back. Sullivan had taught her that too. Don't dwell, don't wallow. Honor the dead by living better than they could, by carrying forward what they couldn't finish, by refusing to let their sacrifice be the end of the story. Back at Fort Bragg, Rachel's quarters felt empty. The training was over, the mission complete, the teacher gone. Now she existed in the strange limbo between what she'd been and what she was becoming. Not a logistics specialist anymore, not quite a full operator, something in between, something being forged in the aftermath of loss. She sat at the small desk, opened the envelope. Inside were 2 items, a letter and the notebook. The one Sullivan had been writing in every night, his compressed legacy, everything he knew distilled into ink and paper. Rachel set the notebook aside, opened the letter. Sullivan's handwriting filled 3 pages. She began to read. "Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Probably died doing something stupid and noble. Probably bought you time to complete the mission. Don't feel guilty about that. I chose it. Every second of it. From the moment I picked you out of 40 candidates to the moment I stood up and drew fire. All choice, all purpose, all exactly how I wanted my story to end. You need to know some things. First, you were never a replacement for Matt. You were never second best or backup plan. You were exactly who I needed exactly when I needed them. A student worthy of everything I had to teach. A warrior I could trust with the legacy I spent 36 years building. When I looked at you, I didn't see my dead son. I saw my living legacy. There's a difference. Second, the weight you're feeling right now, the guilt and grief and sense that you should have done more, saved me somehow, that's normal. I felt it after my first mission where someone died, after Matt, after every loss. But Rachel, guilt only has value if you let it teach you. If you use it as motivation to be better, to make choices that honor the sacrifice instead of being paralyzed by it. Survivor's guilt is real, but so is survivor's responsibility. You lived because I died. Make that trade worth it. Third, the notebook contains everything technical. Wind calls, range estimation, 1,000 small tricks I learned the hard way. Study it, memorize it. But more important than the knowledge is understanding why I'm giving it to you. Not so you can be the best sniper in the Army, so you can build the next one, and the next, and the next. The legacy isn't what you do. It's who you teach to do it after you're gone. You're going to be offered a position as sniper instructor. Hendricks and I arranged it before the mission. You'll think you're not ready. You'll think you need more experience, more time, more proof that you're worthy. Ignore that voice. It's fear dressed up as humility. The truth is you're ready now. You became ready the moment you made those shots in Afghanistan. The moment you chose to honor my sacrifice by becoming worthy of it. Take the position. Teach like I taught you. With patience, with purpose, with the understanding that you're not building shooters. You're building guardians. People who will stand between evil and the innocent. People who will change the math when it matters most. Fourth, and this is important, Rachel, don't make my mistakes. I gave 36 years to the Army and almost nothing to the people I loved. My marriages failed because I was always deployed, always training, always putting the mission first. Matt grew up with a father who was physically present maybe 20% of the time. I missed his childhood chasing my own sense of importance. Don't do that. Find balance. Have a life outside the rifle. Love someone. Build something that isn't about war. Because at the end, on that ridge, I realized that the mission matters, but so does the life you live between missions. Fifth, I'm proud of you. So proud. You exceeded every expectation. Became everything I hoped and more. Watching you transform from uncertain logistics specialist to confident warrior was the greatest privilege of my last months. You gave my death meaning. You gave my life purpose when I thought I had none left. Thank you for that. Thank you for being exactly who you are. Finally, live, really live, take the shots that matter, make the hard choices. Stand up when standing up costs everything, but also laugh, love, experience joy, build relationships, have adventures that don't involve rifles. Because Rachel, life is more than the mission. It's the moments between, the connections, the small victories. Don't wait until you're dying to realize that. Learn it now from my mistakes, from my regrets. You're going to do great things. I know that with absolute certainty. Not because you're talented, though you are. Not because you're trained, though you are. But because you understand what matters. You understand sacrifice, responsibility, the weight of the rifle. You'll carry it well. You'll pass it forwards better than I did. That's my faith. That's my peace. Be better than me. Live longer than Matt. And when your time comes to pass the rifle to someone else, do it with the same care I tried to give you. That's how the legacy survives. That's how we outlive death. Through the warriors we build, through the knowledge we pass down, through the endless chain of teacher and student stretching back generations and forward into forever. I'll be watching. From wherever old soldiers go when the war finally ends. I'll be proud. I'll be grateful. I'll be at peace knowing you're out there, making the world safer, building the next generation, carrying forward what I couldn't finish. Make it count, Rachel. Make every shot count. Make every day count. Make every choice count. That's all any of us can do. That's all any of us should do. Your teacher, your friend, your ghost, Jack Sullivan. Rachel finished reading. Set the letter down. Let the tears come finally. They'd been building for 2 weeks. Now they broke like a dam releasing floodwater. She cried for Sullivan, for Matt, for the father she'd lost when she was 17, for all the weight and sacrifice and impossible choices that came with the rifle. She cried until she was empty, until the grief had burned through and left something harder in its place. Then she picked up the notebook, opened to the first page. Sullivan's handwriting, precise, clear. The first entry dated 3 weeks before they'd met. Entry 1. Tomorrow I select my final student, the one who will carry forward what I've spent a lifetime learning. I don't know who they'll be yet, but I know what I'm looking for. Someone hungry, someone damaged enough to understand loss, but strong enough to overcome it. Someone who will make this mean something. Someone worthy of the knowledge I'm about to die protecting. Rachel turned pages, entry after entry, each one a lesson, a story, a piece of hard-won wisdom. Sullivan had documented everything, from basic fundamentals to advanced techniques no manual covered, from the technical to the philosophical. He'd given her a roadmap, a guide for the journey ahead, the complete download of a mind that had mastered the craft over 3.5 decades. She read until dawn, absorbed it all, memorized passages, understood finally the full scope of what Sullivan had given her. Not just training, not just knowledge, but purpose, direction, a mission that would outlast both their lives, the responsibility to build others like he'd built her, to pass the torch, to keep the flame burning. At 600 hours, there was a knock at her door. Rachel answered, found Captain Lisa Chen standing there with 2 cups of coffee. The intelligence officer looked like she hadn't slept in days, probably hadn't. Chen had cleared Sullivan for the mission, knowing he'd die. Had carried that weight alone for 2 weeks. Thought you might need this. Chen handed her a cup. Also thought you might need company. If I'm wrong, I'll go. Rachel stepped aside. Chen entered. They sat in silence for a few minutes, drinking coffee, watching morning light creep through the window. Finally, Chen spoke. He left me a letter too, thanked me for giving him the chance to die on his terms, said he knew I'd carry guilt for clearing him, asked me not to, said the mission succeeded because of choices we both made. His to fight, mine to let him. Rachel nodded. He was good at that, making his choices sound like they were the only logical option. Like we couldn't have done anything different. Could we have? Chen's voice was quiet. Could I have refused to clear him, forced him into medical? Would those 12 POWs still be captive? Would you be the operator you are now if he'd lived? We'll never know. That's the hell of it. We made the choices we made. Now we live with them. Chen set down her cup, leaned forward. Rachel, I'm not here just for coffee and commiseration. Hendricks is making the instructor offer today. He wanted me to prepare you, to make sure you understand what you're walking into. I'm walking into Sullivan's job, teaching the next generation. Yes, but also into his shadow. People are going to compare you to him. Question if you're qualified after only weeks of training. Some will resent that you got the position. Others will expect you to be exactly like him. None of it will be fair. All of it will be real. Rachel met Chen's eyes. I know. But he trained me for this. Not just the shooting, the rest of it. The politics, the pressure, the weight of standing in front of students who think they know better. He taught me how to carry it. Did he teach you how to handle Derek Cole? Rachel's expression hardened. What about Cole? He's filed a formal complaint. Says you're unqualified for the instructor position. Says it should go to someone with more experience. Says Sullivan showed favoritism and his death doesn't validate nepotism. Let me guess. Cole thinks he should get the job. He's made that clear. Chen paused. He's not entirely wrong, Rachel. You have 6 weeks of sniper training. Most instructors have years. The optics are bad, but the results speak for themselves. You made shots in combat that saved 12 lives. You performed under pressure. You earned the position, even if the path was unconventional. When does Hendricks make the offer? 2 hours, 0800 in his office. Chen stood. Whatever you decide, know that some of us believe in you. Believe Sullivan saw something real. Something worth betting on. Don't let the doubters make you question that. After Chen left, Rachel showered, dressed in fresh utilities, pinned Sullivan's old sniper badge to her uniform. The metal was cool against her chest, a reminder of everything that came before, everything she was responsible for continuing. At 800, she stood outside Hendricks' office, knocked twice, entered when called. The colonel sat behind his desk, looking older than he had at the funeral. Command wore on people, especially command that sent friends to die. Corporal Carter, sit. She sat, straight-backed, hands in lap, professional despite the storm of emotion underneath. Hendricks didn't waste time. I'm offering you the position of primary instructor for the advanced sniper course. You'll be responsible for training 20 to 30 candidates per cycle, 4 cycles per year. The job comes with promotion to sergeant, effective immediately. Do you accept? Rachel thought about Sullivan's letter, about the notebook, about the weight and the responsibility and the legacy waiting to be continued. Thought about Cole's complaint, about the doubters, about how hard this would be. Then thought about 12 prisoners who came home, about a teacher who'd given everything, about promises made over graves. I accept, sir. Hendricks nodded, pulled a set of sergeant stripes from his drawer, slid them across the desk. You'll face opposition, questions about qualifications, resentment from those who think you didn't earn it. How will you handle that? By being so good, they have no choice but to respect the results. By building operators who save lives. By proving Sullivan was right to choose me. Fair answer. The colonel leaned back. Rachel, I'm going to tell you something Jack made me promise not to say until after he was gone. The moment he read your file, he knew. Knew you were the one. Knew you had something that couldn't be taught. He rigged this from the start. Convinced me to let him train you privately. Arrange the mission timeline. Set up the instructor position. All of it calculated to put you exactly where you are now. Why? Because he saw in you what took me 30 years to see in him. Not just talent, character. The kind that makes someone willing to sacrifice everything for strangers. The kind that changes outcomes when outcomes seem predetermined. He built you into his successor because he knew you'd do it right, better than he did, without his mistakes, with his wisdom but your own judgment. Rachel absorbed this. Sullivan had orchestrated everything. Even his death had been part of the plan. A final lesson in sacrifice, in choosing purpose over survival, in making your last act count for something beyond yourself. Sir, what if I fail? What if I'm not what he thought I was? Then you'll learn and improve. That's what warriors do. Hendricks stood, offered his hand. Welcome to the team, Sergeant Carter. Your first class starts in 2 weeks. I suggest you use that time to prepare. Study that notebook Sullivan left you. It's the closest thing to a training manual for training others you'll find. They shook. Rachel left the office wearing sergeant stripes and carrying weight that felt both crushing and sacred. She'd accepted the responsibility. Now came the hard part, actually doing it. The next 2 weeks blurred past. Rachel studied the notebook until she could recite passages from memory, reviewed training plans, observed current instructors, talked to Chen about the psychology of teaching, practiced her delivery, her tone, the balance between demanding and encouraging that Sullivan had mastered. She also visited Arlington 3 more times, stood at the grave, asked questions she knew would never be answered, told Sullivan about her fears, her doubts, the pressure building as the first class approached. She imagined his responses, heard his voice in her head, probably wishful thinking, probably just her own thoughts wearing his voice. But it helped, gave her strength when strength felt scarce. On the morning her first class was scheduled, Rachel woke at 0400. Couldn't sleep, too much nervous energy. She dressed carefully, checked her uniform 3 times, pinned Sullivan's badge, grabbed the notebook, walked to the range in the dark. The students would arrive at 600, 30 candidates, all with more experience than she'd had when Sullivan chose her, all questioning why a sergeant with 6 weeks of training was their instructor, all ready to judge, to challenge, to prove she didn't deserve this. Rachel set up in the classroom, arranged chairs, checked the projector, put Sullivan's notebook on the desk in front, placed his old M24 rifle on a stand, visual reminders of the legacy she represented. At 600, the students filed in, 30 faces, most male, all skeptical. She recognized the look, had worn it herself not so long ago, the certainty that they knew better. That experience counted more than results, that this was politics, not merit. Derek Cole was among them, sitting in the back, arms crossed, face set in an expression that said this would be a waste of time. Several others had similar postures, ready to dismiss before she'd spoken a word. Rachel let them settle, let the silence stretch, studied each face, some curious, some hostile, some neutral, all waiting to see what she'd do, how she'd justify her presence, whether she'd earn the right to stand before them. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was steady, calm, the way Sullivan's had always been. My name is Sergeant Rachel Carter. 6 weeks ago, I was a logistics specialist, average shooter, no combat experience, unremarkable in every way that matters in this community. Then Master Sergeant Jack Sullivan chose me, trained me, transformed me into something capable of operating at the highest level. 3 weeks ago in Afghanistan, I made shots at 1,500 meters under combat conditions that saved 12 American prisoners of war. I did this not because I'm naturally gifted, but because I was taught by the best this community has ever seen. She paused. Let that sink in. Cole's expression hadn't changed, but others were listening now, leaning forward slightly, interested despite themselves. Some of you think I haven't earned this position. That 6 weeks of training doesn't qualify me to teach. You're right, it doesn't. But here's what does. I was Sullivan's final student, his last project. He gave me everything he learned in 36 years, compressed it, refined it, distilled it down to the essential truth of what makes a sniper exceptional. And before he died buying time for those POWs to get home, he made me promise to pass it forward. That's why I'm here. Not because I'm the best, because I was taught by the best and have a responsibility to build others as good as he built me. She picked up the notebook, held it up so they could see. This contains everything Sullivan knew, every technique, every lesson, every piece of wisdom earned through 3 wars and 168 confirmed kills. This is your training manual, not the official doctrine, not the standard curriculum. This is what really works, what really saves lives, what really makes the difference between coming home and not. Rachel set the notebook down, picked up the M24, Sullivan's rifle, the one he'd carried for decades, the one he'd given to his son, the one Matt had carried until a grenade took his life, the one Sullivan had given to Rachel, the physical symbol of legacy passed down through blood and choice and sacrifice. This rifle has been to Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. It's saved hundreds of lives, taken many others. It's been carried by heroes, by warriors, by men who understood that holding this weapon meant accepting responsibility for decisions that echo forward forever. Sullivan gave it to me. Today, and I'm giving it to all of you. Not the physical rifle, but what it represents. The knowledge, the discipline, the sacred responsibility of changing the math when Americans are in danger. She set the rifle down, looked at Cole directly. Some of you will wash out. That's statistics. Not everyone has what it takes. Some will discover they don't want the weight. Others will find the pressure too much. A few will realize their ego wrote checks their skills can't cash. No shame in it. Knowing your limits is wisdom. But for those who make it through, who earn the right to carry a rifle like this into combat, you'll go knowing you were trained by someone who learned from the absolute best. Someone who has zero interest in politics or favoritism or anything except building warriors worthy of the mission. Rachel moved to the door, opened it. The early morning light spilled in. We start in 30 minutes. Range 12. Bring your gear and your best effort. Leave your doubts and your judgments behind. You'll need all your energy for the work ahead, because I'm going to train you the way Sullivan trained me. Hard, relentless, with absolute refusal to accept less than your maximum potential. Some of you will hate me for it. All of you will be better for it. Dismissed. They filed out, quiet, thoughtful. Cole lingered, approached her. His expression was unreadable. You really make those shots in Afghanistan? 1,500 meters, variable wind, multiple targets. Yes, he studied her, then nodded once. I'll earn my place in this class. Won't ask for special treatment. Won't complain, but I'll earn it. That's all Sullivan ever asked of me. That's all I ask of you. Cole left. Rachel stood alone in the classroom, felt the weight of what she'd just done. Committed to. She'd stood before them and claimed the legacy, declared herself worthy of continuing Sullivan's work. Now came the hard part, actually doing it. The first day was brutal. She ran them through drills Sullivan had run her through. No modifications, no mercy. By lunch, 3 had dropped. By evening, 5 more were questioning their choice to be there. But the ones who remained showed something. Hunger, determination, the quality Sullivan had recognized in her. Cole performed exceptionally. Whatever resentment he felt, he channeled it into excellence. His shots were crisp, his fieldcraft solid. He pushed harder than anyone, Burkong, trying to prove something, maybe to her, maybe to himself. Rachel recognized the drive, had felt it herself. After the first week, Ben Garrett stopped by the range, watched her work with the students, approached during a break. You're doing good work, better than I expected. High praise coming from you. Garrett smiled. Sullivan would be proud. You've got his method, his patience, but also something he didn't have. You're not trying to recreate yourself. You're finding what makes each student unique and building on that. That's next level teaching. Learn from the best. Number Garrett shook his head. You learned the technical from Sullivan, but the teaching, the actual art of building warriors, that's you. That's something he saw in you, something he knew you'd bring to this work. Trust it. The weeks turned into months. The first class graduated. 22 of the original 30 made it through. All 22 were competent snipers. 10 were exceptional. Rachel felt pride in that, felt Sullivan's presence in every successful shot, every student who grasped the lessons, every moment someone exceeded their own expectations. The second class was easier. She'd refined her methods, learned what worked, what didn't, how to identify who would make it and who wouldn't, how to push without breaking, how to build confidence without creating arrogance. Cole graduated top of the first class, approached Rachel at the ceremony, extended his hand. I was wrong about you, about this. You earned it, more than earned it. Thank you for not giving up on me when I was being an ass. Rachel shook his hand. Sullivan taught me everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. You proved yourself, that's all that matters. 6 months after Sullivan's death, Rachel returned to Arlington, brought something with her, a framed photograph. The first graduating class, 22 faces, all warriors now, all carrying forward the knowledge Sullivan had died protecting. She placed it at the base of his headstone, knelt down, spoke quietly. 22, Master Sergeant. First class. 22 warriors who will go into combat with your lessons in their heads, your wisdom guiding their choices. 22 pieces of you still fighting even though you're gone. That's what legacy means. That's what you built. She stood, rendered a salute, sharp, precise, the way he taught her, the way she now taught others. A voice spoke behind her. He'd be proud of you, you know. Rachel turned, found an older man in civilian clothes, gray hair, weathered face. He looked familiar somehow. The man stepped closer, extended his hand. Patrick Williams, Marine Sergeant. I was one of the 12 you and Sullivan rescued. Rachel shook his hand. Memories flooded back. The gaunt faces on the helicopter. The hollow eyes of men who'd survived 3 years in hell. Williams looked different now. Healthier, stronger, alive. I wanted to thank you, Williams gestured at the grave. And him. I wanted you to know what that rescue meant. I've got 3 kids. Wife I thought I'd never see again. Because of what you did, because of what he did to him, I got to go home. Got to hold them. Got to have a life I thought was over. That's not something you can repay, but it's something that should be acknowledged. Rachel felt emotion building in her throat. He would say you repaying it by living well, by being a good father, by making the sacrifice mean something. I am. Williams pulled out his wallet, showed her a photo. 3 kids, all smiling, beautiful family. This is what his death bought, what your courage protected. I'll make sure they know. When they're old enough to understand, I'll tell them about the warriors who came for us when no one else would, about the teacher who died buying time, about the student who made the shots that brought us home. They stood together at the grave for a few minutes, 2 people whose lives had been forever changed by the man buried beneath their feet, 2 pieces of a legacy still rippling outward, still creating consequences, still mattering. Williams left. Rachel stayed a while longer, told Sullivan about the classes, about the students, about Williams and his family, about how the sacrifice kept paying dividends every single day. As the sun set, she made her final promise, one she'd repeat every time she returned to this place. I won't stop, Master Sergeant. Won't slow down. Won't let the legacy fade. Every student I train is you still teaching, still building, still changing the math. That's immortality. That's how we beat death. By refusing to let the knowledge die with us. By passing it forward into forever. You taught me that, among 1,000 other things, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure it continues. She walked away as darkness fell, back to the base, back to the work, back to the next class waiting to be transformed from candidates into warriors. The cycle continuing, the legacy growing, the ghost of Jack Sullivan still teaching through the student he'd built in his final days. 1 year after his death, Rachel was promoted to staff sergeant. 3 years later, she'd trained over 200 students. 5 years later, some of her students were instructing, passing down what she taught them, what Sullivan had taught her, the chain extending, the knowledge multiplying, the legacy becoming something bigger than any single person. And through it all, Rachel carried the weight, the notebook, the responsibility, the sacred trust of honoring a teacher by building students worthy of him. She carried it with pride, with purpose, with the absolute certainty that she was doing exactly what she was meant to do. The last operator had died on a ridge in Afghanistan, but his last lesson lived on, in every shot Rachel made, in every student she trained, in every warrior who carried forward the knowledge one dying man had fought to preserve. That was the true victory, not the medals or the confirmed kills or the dramatic last stand, but the quiet continuation, the patient building, the endless chain of teacher and student stretching backward into history and forward into futures unseen. Jack Sullivan had understood that, had planned for it, had given everything to ensure it, and in doing so had achieved the only immortality that mattered, not living forever, but creating something that would. The legacy lived and would continue living, long after everyone who'd known the man had themselves passed into memory. That was the gift. That was the truth. That was the answer to the question every warrior eventually faced. What remains when we're gone? Everything we taught, everyone we built, every life we touched, every choice we influenced, every warrior we prepared, every mission we enabled, every future we secured, all of it remaining, continuing, growing, becoming more than we ever could have been alone. That was Jack Sullivan's legacy. Not what he did, but what he created. Not how he died, but what he left living. And Rachel Carter, his final student, his living legacy, his greatest achievement, carried it forward with honor, with dedication, with the absolute certainty that a life measured in impact rather than years was a life well lived. The sun set over Fort Bragg, over the ranges where warriors learned their craft, over the graves at Arlington where heroes rested, over a nation protected by guardians who stood between evil and innocence. And somewhere in that twilight, if you listen carefully, you might hear the crack of a rifle, the voice of a teacher, the promise of a student, all blending together into something that sounded like hope. The legacy lived, would always live, as long as warriors chose to teach, as long as students chose to learn, as long as the sacred knowledge passed from dying hands to living ones. That was the last operator's final mission. And like every mission before it, he'd completed it perfectly. Mission accomplished. Legacy secured. The watch continued. Forever.